Hey everyone, tonight we journey far from Egypt's pyramids to the lesser-known quarries of Jebel Barkal, where Nubian sculptors hewed immense sphinxes into life. Before we begin, dim your lights, perhaps light a small candle for atmosphere, and if you're enjoying this trip into sleepy history, hit like and subscribe. Tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I love knowing who's joining us under these whispers of stone. Picture a sun-baked cliff overlooking a broad bend of the Nile. Carving camps cluster at its base, mud brick huts half hidden in date palm groves, smoke curling as workers boil water and sharpen bronze chisels. In this opening section, you'll follow the quarrymen as they extract massive granite blocks, navigate seasonal floods, and endure blistering heat. You'll meet the overseers tallying daily output on ostraca shards, the taskmasters wielding flint-edged picks, and the families who cook, mend cloth, and keep watch for nighttime crocodile raids. Let's ease into the rhythms of daily life by the river's edge, and begin with the crack of the first chisel on dawn-lit granite. As first light spilled across the Nile's dark ribbon, you find yourself at the foot of Jebel Barkal's sheer cliff, its sandstone and granite strata glowing pale ochre. The air is already thick with heat, but the workers press on. Their morning rituals begin at the ovens, clay-lined pits where pots of millet porridge steam, and where water for the day's labours is heated to soften bronze tools. Overseers, skin leathery from decades in the sun, eyes sharp as flint, call roll by name and clan. Each man carries a chiselling kit, a broad-bladed bronze chisel dulled to a matte patina, 2 flint-edged picks for roughing, and a leather pouch of red ochre mixed with animal fat, used to mark block outlines. You watch as they shoulder heavy coils of rope and descend into shallow trenches. Cut into the cliff face, hack away at seams, and wedge stone splinters to break free 2-ton blocks. Family life presses in close. Children escort water jars to the work sites, teenage girls rekindle hearth fires with palm fronds, and midday meals are shared on straw mats, shaded by woven date palm screens. Yet even these moments pulse with purpose. Every grain of sand and drop of sweat brings the sculptors closer to unveiling the great Sphinx destined for the temple plateau above. As the sun climbs higher, the overseer's horn, made from a hollowed buffalo horn, signals the midday break. Workers collapse in the shade, faces smudged in ochre stripes, sharing water and stale bread. It's then you realise, carved stone is only half the story. The real art lies in orchestrating thousands of small tasks, quarrying, hauling, tallying, that sustain a civilization's grandest monuments. How did these quarry camps manage the relentless Nile floods and scorching seasons, and what tacit knowledge passed from father to son ensured that Sphinx blocks remained uncracked and ready for the carvers above? You witness the daily rhythms of Jebel Barkal's quarry camps, workers chiselling sunrise granite, families sustaining them with porridge and water, and overseers tracking every block freed from the cliff face. Now in Section 2, you'll follow those massive 2-ton blocks on their journey from riverbank trenches to the temple heights above, a trek demanding precise coordination, seasonal ingenuity, and collective muscle across miles of shifting sands. Along the way, you'll glimpse the hidden hierarchies of labour, the flood-tide calendars guiding each haul, and the countless improvisations, greased logs, reed-woven sledges, rolling beams that turn slate-hard stone into living monuments. As the sun arcs westward, consider how this logistical ballet shaped not only the sphinxes themselves, but the social fabric of Nubian life on the Nile's edge. I, seasonal calendars and the rhythm of the Nile. A, flood cycle planning. The Nile's annual inundation dictated the tempo of every quarry campaign. From midsummer through early autumn, floodwaters surged, covering low-lying fields and submerging the river's islands. While farmers abandoned maize and barley plots, quarry overseers saw opportunity. Floating freight windows. As floodwaters peaked, a natural ramp formed between cliff base and river surface. Men lashed wooden rafts, bundles of papyrus reeds reinforced with cedar planks, and towed them to newly freed granite blocks. Each raft held 2 or 3 blocks, buoyed by the swollen Nile, and could slip beneath the cliff face where dryland sledges could not reach. Dry season hauling. When waters receded by late autumn, the riverbank retreated yards away, exposing muddied shores. Workers laid parallel beams of sycamore logs atop packed sand, greased them with animal fat, and dragged blocks on reed-woven sledges. Teams of 20 to 30 labourers, ropes looped over their shoulders, strained in unison, every grunt and footfall choreographed by a rhythmic chant led by the foreman. B calendar, inscribed in clay tokens. Overseers tracked flood levels and haul schedules on small clay tablets, each token pressed with a grid of notches. Grain count tokens. Dates corresponded to inundation heights. A single dot indicated the festival of Wepet Renpet, New Year flood arrival. 5 lines marked mid-flood slack, and clusters of circles denoted optimal days for raft launches. Apprentices memorized these patterns under elder supervision, learning that a single misread could strand a block for weeks. Coordination with carvers. Couriers ferried finished blocks upstream to carving workshops on the plateau. Timing was critical. Blocks had to arrive before the first winter chills, when shedding frost could crack unseasoned set. 1. The tablets ensured that quarry and carving crews operated on the same temporal map, their separate labours synchronised by simple clay symbols. 2. Hierarchies of labour and social organisation. A. Overseers, foremen and skilled specialists. Georgian scribes in distant capitals might have marvelled at the scale of this operation, but on the ground, success depended on clear chains of command. Chief Overseer, Hemkar. Atop the hierarchy sat the Hemkar, an official appointed by the Nubian king and housed in a palatial tent near the quarry. Clad in linen robes dyed with red ochre, he coordinated seasonal quotas, allocated grain rations, and adjudicated disputes. His seal, a carved Sphinx emblem, authenticated haul orders and carving transfers. Team foreman, Hiri. Beneath him, a cadre of Heris led crews of 30 labourers each. They issued daily chisel counts, rationed water breaks, and ensured rhythmic hauling chants. Ha ha he kept teams in step. Foremen wielded polished staff wands, tapping them on logs as signals to start or halt, their voices carrying above clamour and wind. Specialised stone cutters. Before blocks moved, master stonecutters inspected seams, testing rock density with tapping stones and sounding rods. Their calibrated strikes, just firm enough to reveal internal fissures, ensured blocks would split cleanly, avoiding wasted effort. These specialists, often veterans from neighbouring quarries, earned extra grain and finer linen tunics. B. Labour rotation and worker welfare. Despite the heat and strain, the authorities recognised that exhausted labourers destroyed more stone than they saved. Shift rotations. Workdays divided into 3 shifts. Dawn to mid-morning, mid-afternoon to dusk, and moonlit night watch teams. Night shifts maintained minimal haul operations under oil lamps, preparing routes for dawn. This distributed labour prevented muscle exhaustion and reduced heatstroke risks in midday sun. Medical scribes and rest stations, small clinics, mud brick shelters lined with papyrus mats, offered herbal poultices for blisters, bandaged sprained ankles, and dispensed cooling infusions of date palm sap and mint. Medical scribes recorded treatments on leather scrolls, tracking individual health histories and adjusting ration weights, more bread for exhausted haulers, extra beer, barley-based ale for stonecutters. 3. Engineering innovations, moving tons with simple machines. A. Greased log rollers and sledge systems, parallel roller tracks. Teams arranged sets of 6 sturdy palm trunk rollers beneath sledges. As a block passed beyond the rear roller, labourers removed it and replaced it at the front, creating a continuous conveyance. Planks of seasoned tamarisk wood formed sledges, their runners curved upward to cradle the block's base. Animal draft and mechanical advantage. In winter, when reed sledges wetted and froze, teams hitched draft oxen or donkeys to the front of sledges, amplifying human pull. Simple block-and-tackle hoists made of coiled rope and pulleys cut hauling crews in half, crucial when terrain grew uneven or sandy. B. Ramp construction and stone ramps, earthen access ramps. To raise blocks to plateau height, nearly 30 metres above river level, workers built massive ramps of compacted earth and rubble, zigzagging up the cliff face. Ramp pitches never exceeded 10 degrees Celsius. Eeping gradient manageable for sledges. After stone passage, ramps eroded back into the landscape or were raised to prevent enemy use. Wooden trackways. Where earth proved unstable, carpenters assembled timber cribbing, frameworks of palm and sycamore, anchored to cliff fissures, supporting wooden tracks for sledges. These temporary structures extended the hauling season, unaffected by riverbank erosion during floods. 4. Rituals of departure and arrival. A. Launch day ceremonies. When the largest blocks, each weighing over 3 tons, descended into rafts or onto ramp sledges, work paused for ritual observance. Libation of Nile water. Priestly attendants sprinkled Nile water mixed with frankincense over each block's leading edge, invoking Khnum, god of creation, to bless safe passage. Carvers believed that neglecting this libation courted cracks and misfortune. Choral blessings. Temple choir boys, trained in low chants, lined the riverbank. As blocks glided into the current, they intoned a dirge-like melody, symbolically guiding granite souls toward the temple workshop. The mournful tune echoed across water, binding quarry and temple in shared purpose. B. Plateau reception and preliminary dressing. Upon arrival at the temple complex, blocks underwent the first stages of shaping, alignment and surveying. Architects used knotted cords and sighting rods to align blocks with foundation markers, ensuring Sphinx proportions matched blueprint grids engraved on plaster walls. Even a few centimetres off axis risked toppling years later. Rough dressing. Master carvers, stationed on scaffold platforms, applied heavy picks to trim excess stone, defining Sphinx shoulders and chest planes. This rough block dressing removed roughly 30% of block mass, calibrating weight distribution before fine carving commenced in Section 3. Unresolved question. As you imagine blocks sliding on grease-slicked rollers, oxen straining on wooden sledges, and priests anointing stone with sacred Nile water, ponder this. What hidden expertise of timing floods, of balancing human and animal labour, and of weaving ritual into engineering allowed Nubian sculptors to move colossal granite masses across desert and river, forging not just monuments of stone but a testament to human cooperation at the Nile's edge? You followed the quarry hands as they pried free 2-ton granite blocks from Jebel Barkal's cliffs and hauled them by raft, sledge and oxen up to the temple plateau. Now, in this final chapter of Story 1, we witness the transformative artistry that turned these raw stones into living sphinxes, the precision carving by moonlit workshops, the sacred ceremonies consecrating each face and pore, and the Sphinx's silent vigil over Nile-fed kingdoms. Along the way, you'll see how technical mastery, ritual devotion, and dynastic ambition merged in every touch of hammer and chisel, leaving a legacy carved in stone that endures across millennia. I. Workshop organisation and carving methodologies. A. Night shift workshops and tool rotations. Once blocks arrived on the plateau's broad terraces, masters organised carving teams into day and night shifts to maximise temperate hours and protect tools from midday heat. Moonlight quarries. As the desert sun receded, lantern-lit scaffolds rose against cliff-cut walls, where dozens of carvers, seated on padded wooden stools, began rough shaping. Bronze chisels, cooled in water troughs between passes, removed large stone chips in rhythmic strokes. Night air reduced tool wear, and the dim lamp glow lent a sombre, contemplative atmosphere. Tool maintenance cycles. Every third night, workshops paused as blacksmith prospectors, veteran quarry captains skilled in metalworking, rishi. Arpen chisels and reforged flanged picks. Their portable forges, small clay crucibles fired with palm frond charcoal, glowed red amidst the stone dust, ensuring tools remained razor-sharp for fine work. B. Progressive carving stages. Carving progressed through 5 meticulously planned stages, each overseen by a master sculptor, Meroë, whose authority rivaled the overseer in the quarry. Block dressing review. After initial trimming on arrival, Section 2, specialists verified block geometry against temple blueprints etched on plaster panels. Using water-filled sighting rods, they marked horizontal datum lines and vertical axis centres in red ochre, guiding subsequent carving. Rough modelling. Teams removed large swaths of excess stone to reveal Sphinx shoulders, chest planes, and flank volumes. Heavy bronze picks scored slice lines, wooden wedges tapped cracks along these guides. By dawn, the prowling Sphinx's broad silhouette emerged from the monolith's gloom. Intermediate refinement. Bronze chisels of medium width carved anatomical details, lion's haunches, muscular forearms, paw contours, while flint tools incised preliminary facial outlines. Painters among the crew applied lime water and soot washes to highlight contours, allowing carvers to see subtle shadows and correct asymmetries. Fine carving and polishing. Master carvers wielded slender chisels for facial features, the Sphinx's softly curved lips, feline nose bridge, and almond-shaped eyes. They used abrasive powders, ground quartz mixed with river sand, to smooth surfaces, followed by palm fibre pads soaked in olive oil for a luminous sheen reflecting lamplight. Final detailing and inscription. Once shapes met canonical proportions, nose-to-mouth ratios, paw width relative to body length, specialists engraved hieroglyphic cartouches on the Sphinx's back slab, proclaiming the pharaoh's name in crisp, angular signs. These inscriptions, filled with cinnabar pigment, glowed faintly in torchlight. T2. Ritual consecration and ceremonial unveiling. A. Dedication. Rites of the completed sphinxes. Carving alone did not suffice. Each sphinx required ritual activation to become a sacred guardian. Purification with Nile water and incense. Priests bearing polished metal bowls poured fresh Nile water over the sphinx's head and shoulders, chanting invocations to Amun-Re for divine presence. Pandanus press oil dripped from ornate flasks, anointing paws and chin, while incense burners scattered myrrh and frankincense smoke. Opening of the eyes of Horus. At midday on the day of dedication, officiants painted the Sphinx's eyes with a black coal paste, then drew the stylized Eye of Horus symbol on each temple of the rock face. In ritual belief, this act opened the stone guardian's vision, allowing it to watch over temple precincts. Processional festival. The unveiling concluded with a procession. Priests carried statuettes of the Sphinx through the temple courtyard, accompanied by dancers beating hand drums and flautists playing mellow reed tones. Offerings of bread, beer and poultry lined the Sphinx's base, consecrating it as an active protector of the sacred precinct. B. Inaugural duties and long-term rituals. After dedication, Sphinxes required ongoing rites to maintain their vigilant power. Monthly oil offerings. Every new moon, temple attendants placed small lamps before each Sphinx, burning olive and castor oil mixtures to symbolize the ongoing life force. Incense resins kindled at their bases, the fragrant smoke rising like prayers to the silent statues. Anniversary festivals. Each Sphinx's birth date, recorded on its cartouche, became an annual festival featuring boat races on the Nile, communal feasts, and special masses of papyrus boat burning, reaffirming the connection between stone guardians and river lifeblood. 3. Social and political deeds. Mentions of Sphinx construction, the pharaoh's patronage and Nubian identity. Though commissioned by Egyptian pharaohs, these sphinxes fostered complex cultural interplay. Royal prestige and diplomatic messaging. Inscriptions emphasized the pharaoh's titles, Lord of the Two Lands, beloved of Amun, while depictions included Nubian symbols such as the desert falcon and river lily, catering to local elite sensibilities. These collaborative iconographies affirmed Egyptian sovereignty while acknowledging Nubia's regional importance. Local labour as cultural bridge. Nubian quarry communities took pride in their craftsmanship, seeing each sphinx as a testament to ancestral skill. Marriages between Egyptian officials and Nubian families further cemented ties, as local women wove sphinx motifs into textiles gifted at court, blending artistic traditions. B. Economic impacts and urban growth. The quarry-to-plateau enterprise fueled nearby settlements, market expansion, supply camps burgeoned into permanent villages offering grain, cloth, pottery and metalwork. Traders travelled from distant oases exchanging dates, salt and gold dust for Egypt's papyrus and linen, knitting Nubia into a vibrant trans-regional network. Specialisation and guild formation. Over decades, carving crews formalised into hereditary guilds, each mastering distinct craft stages, rough shaping, fine carving, painting, inscription, passing skills through direct lineage and controlling training access. Guilds wielded social power, rivaling local chieftains, their labour essential to temple economies. 4. Enduring legacy and modern reflections. A. The Sphinx's silent vigil. Today, the weathered faces of Nubian sphinxes at Jebel Barkal still survey the Nile's curves, their gaze softened by millennia of wind and sand. Though many have lost noses and headdresses, their lingering forms testify to Anshidi, ingenuity, archaeological rediscovery. 19th century explorers documented these sphinxes in sketchbooks. Modern archaeology uses 3D scanning and geological analysis to trace toolmark sequences back to Nubian chisels, validating oral histories of master craftsmen. Cultural heritage and UNESCO. Recognised as part of the Nubian Monuments World Heritage listing, these sphinxes remain focal points for Sudanese and Egyptian heritage, drawing scholarly and tourist attention alike. Preservation efforts, lime wash fillings, protective shelters, seek to extend their vigil for future generations. B. Reflections on craft, community and continuity. The story of Jebel Barkal's Sphinx sculptors illuminates broader truths about human endeavour. Coordinated complexity. Moving and carving colossal blocks required environmental attunement, flood calendars, social orchestration, guild hierarchies, and technological creativity, sledges and ramps. This synergy underpinned not only monuments but entire communities. Interwoven identities. Though serving imperial ambition, Nubian quarry workers stamped sphinxes with local symbols, asserting regional identity within broader state frameworks, a reminder that labourers shape, as much as obey, cultural narratives. Legacy of labour. Beneath every carved face lies a human story of toil, skill, and ritual devotion. The sphinxes stand not just as stone icons, but as repositories of communal memory, their silent forms echoing the chants, hymns, and hammer beats that brought them into being. thought-provoking reflection. As you imagine moonlit workshops echoing with chisels, priests anointing stone with Nile water, and labourers straining at greased rollers, consider this question. In our own endeavours, what modern monuments might we collectively build, through synchronised effort, reverent ritual and shared expertise, that could stand as testaments to our values, there to guide fews? Mature generations as the Nubian sphinxes guide us today. Tracing the granite's origins, from mountain veins to quarry face, you have met the sculptors and witnessed their feats of engineering at Jebel Barkal. Now turn your attention to the very substance they shaped. Granite so ancient that its crystalline grains whisper of deep time. In this section, you'll follow the material journey of Nubian sphinxes' stone, from the subterranean veins that formed in tectonic crucibles, through the slow toil of extraction in riverside quarries, to the first glimpses of raw blocks stacked like sleepers awaiting their final transformation. Along the way, you'll learn how geologists' keen observation, ancient empirical knowledge, and the harsh interplay of sun and sand combined to produce the perfect medium for these enduring monuments. Geological birth of granite beneath Nubian skies. Long before human hands carved sphinxes, deep within the Earth's crust, immense pressures and temperatures melded molten magma into the coarse-grained granite of Jebel Barkal. Though today we speak in modern geological terms, ancient quarry supervisors possessed their own law. Tectonic foundations. Over 600 million years ago, during the Pan-African orogeny, continental collisions thrust hot magma upward. As it cooled, slow crystallization forged feldspar, quartz, and mica, interlocked in patterns that both strengthened and gave subtle color variation, pinks, greys, and speckled blacks, ideal for monumental sculpture. Surface weathering and joint formation. Exposed to sun's scorching heat by day and frigid desert nights, the granite's outer layers fractured along natural joints. Over centuries, these fissures widened, offering quarry masters lines of weakness they would exploit. Elder geognosts, precursors to modern geologists, identified sections where joint spacing and grain alignment promised minima, or cracking during block removal. Chapter 2. Identifying quarry sites. Empirical expertise in stone selection. Before chisels ever struck, quarry overseers scouted the mountain's flanks, seeking stone of uniform texture and absence of macroscopic flaws. Their criteria, honed over generations, paralleled today's petrographic inspections. Surface sampling and sound testing. Workers tapped rock faces with bronze hammers, listening for a clear, ringing tone, an oral indication of dense, crack-free stone. A dull thud signalled internal voids or fractures. Such sites were bypassed, saving countless labour hours and preserving the Sphinx's integrity for centuries. Visual grain inspection. In bright sunlight, overseers held small hand-sized slabs aloft, discerning subtle speckles of quartz and the sheen of mica flakes. Even spacing of grains indicated predictable cutting behaviour. Blocks with irregular grain, where feldspar crystals clustered, risked delamination under chisel stress and were rejected in favour of homogeneous outcrops. 3. Quarry face. Preparation, exposing the granite veins. Once a suitable outcrop was identified, often on sun-baked benches where floodwaters receded most cleanly, quarry teams prepared the face for systematic extraction. Clearing sand and debris, workers swept away wind-blown sand with bundles of dried palm fronds, revealing fresh stone. In shaded alcoves, stubborn dust was washed with Nile water in clay troughs, then patted dry to inspect for micro-cracks. Marking seam lines, using charcoal sticks and red ochre paint mixed with fat, supervisors drew precise cut lines along natural joints. These guides formed a grid, dividing the face into block rectangles typically measuring 1.5 to 2 meters per side, dimensions balancing sculptural ambition with transport feasibility. Creating wedge holes. At the corners of each marked block, labourers drilled shallow holes with handheld metal drills, bronze bits rotated by bow-like strings. Into these holes, they inserted wooden wedges soaked in Nile resin. The resin swelling under the sun's heat exerted gradual pressure, widening cracks until blocks separated along natural planes. Unresolved question. As you imagine overseers tapping granite walls, apprentices sweeping away desert sands, and resin-soaked wedges splitting massive blocks along invisible veins, consider this. How did the interplay of ancient geological wisdom, keen sensory testing, and simple yet effective stoneworking techniques enable Nubian quarrymen to select and extract the perfect granite for their sphinxes? And what does this reveal about the depth of empirical knowledge in pre-scientific societies? You traced Nubian sphinxes back to their geological origins, magma cooled into crystalline granite and surface weathered by sun and sand until quarry overseers could exploit natural joints to extract blocks. Now, we delve deeper into the lived realities of extraction, the specific techniques quarry teams employed to free colossal masses from the mountain's heart, the intricate social systems that sustained these crews, and the seasonal and environmental hurdles, flood surges, sandstorms, blistering heat that shaped every day's work. By examining these layers, you'll see how the simple act of prizing stone from earth became a complex dance of labour management, environmental adaptation, and incremental innovation. Crucial prelude to the Sphinx's final form. I. Extraction techniques, from wedge hole to block release. A. Drilling and wedge methods. While ancient quarrymen understood the power of natural joints, they still needed to initiate and control block separation. Their primary method combined bronze drills, wooden wedges, and hydraulic expansion. Bronze drills and bowstring apparatus. Drill men prepared tapered bronze bits, hardened in small pit forges, sharpened weekly by itinerant blacksmiths. Each bit fitted the end of a slender wooden shaft. Wrapped around the shaft's midpoint was a looped string or sinew cord, held taut like a bowstring. By alternately twisting and bowing the shaft, the drill rotated smoothly, grinding into granite with surprising efficiency. Apprentices alternated drilling shifts. One applied steady downward pressure, the other maintained rhythmic bowing, coordinated labour that made up to 38 shallow holes per block corner in a single morning. Resin-soaked wooden wedges. Into these pre-drilled holes, workers inserted thin wedges of tamarisk wood, chosen for straight grain and density. Before insertion, wedges were soaked in a mixture of Nile water and goose fat resin, causing them to swell as they dried in the sun. Over several hours, expanding wood exerted pressures of up to 2 to 3 bars, enough to propagate fractures along the target joint plane without violent splitting. Quarry logs note that resin percentages between 15 to 20% by volume yielded optimal swelling rates. A formula passed down in oral injunctions: soften the wood, let the heat awake its might. Sequential wedge removal and block release. When wedges reached maximum expansion, overseers dispatched teams to remove small chiseling ledges at block bases, weakening the final footings. Then, with coordinated leverage, long wooden poles braced under block edges, teams applied upward force, lifting block corners and rattling wedges, causing block separation with a low, rolling crack. Workers timed these lifts for early morning or late afternoon when thermal contractions opened fissures slightly, easing release. B. Fire setting for difficult sections. Where joint patterns were irregular or granite extra hard, fire setting offered an alternative. Heating and quenching cycles. Quarry crews built wood-fueled fires directly against the rock face, raising surface temperatures above 400 degrees C. After several hours, water from heated kettles, drawn from the Nile and warmed to 50 degrees C, was splashed onto glowing stone. Rapid cooling induced micro-cracking beneath the surface. Workers then struck the fissured face with picks, prying off blistered fragments more easily than with chisels alone. Controlled application. Fire setting required caution. Too intense heat caused unwanted spalling, jeopardizing block integrity. Overseers thus designated small test patches no larger than a cubit square. Only after confirming predictable blistering patterns did they extend the method to critical extraction seams. Annual charcoal stockpiles near the quarry attest to fire setting's sustained but limited use. 2. Workforce dynamics, organisation, welfare and skill transmission. A. Recruitment and labour cohorts. Quarry work demanded strength, skill and discipline. Authorities structured labour in 3 overlapping cohorts. Core specialists. These included drillers, master wedge handlers and fire setters, roles requiring years of apprenticeship. Specialists enjoyed higher rations, extra barley loaves and beer, and exemption from the most arduous hall work. Their names recorded on ostraca tablets signified their elevated status and secured positions for their sons. General quarry labourers, majority of workers performed shifting tasks, clearing debris, carrying tools, hauling wedge levers and tending water fires. Rotating every 10 days, labourers experienced varied duties, preventing physical burnout and fostering cross-training. Tokens marked daily assignments. Any refusal to perform could incur grain penalties enforced by foremen. Support staff and specialists in training. Women and teenage boys formed auxiliary teams, cooking, mending nets, fetching water and crafting resin wedge mixtures. Though not paid by grain, they received communal honours, expedited access to temple festivals and preferential lodging, acknowledging their essential yet unchronicled contributions. B. Health, morale and incentives. Recognising that fatigue and injury undermined productivity, overseers invested in worker welfare, medicinal plants and herbal remedies. Village herbalists, often women versed in desert flora, supplied poultices made from crushed papyrus leaves and lotus root extracts to treat chisel wounds. Juniper berry infusions eased joint pains from repetitive drilling. Daily distributions of cumin-flavoured pita helped stave off dysentery in warmer months. religious and recreational relief, sundown call to prayer allowed workers to gather in small shrines at camp edges, short sea. Hants and readings offered spiritual solace. On the Nile's far bank, occasional wrestling matches and reed boat races let labourers release pent-up energy, bonding squads and reinforcing hierarchies through friendly rivalries, a crucial morale boost amid back-breaking toil. Performance bonuses and honours, monumental quotas, blocks removed per season, determined communal grain rations. Exceeding targets earned supplementary beer barrels and ceremonial wreaths of palm leaves. Public recognitions, foremen draping honoured labourers with dyed linen sashes, enhanced social prestige and incentivised sustained effort. 3. Environmental challenges, heat, sandstorms and flood extremes. A. Desert heat and thermal fatigue. The Nubian sun tested both stone and man. Tool, thermal management, bronze chisels, left exposed midday, overheated and softened, dulling edges. Blacksmiths ran emergency forges near work sites, quenching heated tools in oil and water baths. Apprentices monitored tool temperatures by hand-touch tests. If too hot to touch for longer than 2 seconds, chisels cooled again before reuse. Worker hydration and timing. Water bearers traced a strict schedule. Salt-infused water in early mornings to prehydrate, pure Nile water at mid-shift, barley tea coolers at dusk. Overseers logged hydration in small tally scrolls. Insufficient intake merited midday rest until proper drinking resumed. B. Sandstorms and dust management. Sudden winds could bury quarry faces in minutes. Protective screen erecting. Teams erected reed thatch windbreaks, tall, semi-permeable screens, to deflect high winds from critical work zones. Portable stands allowed swift reconfiguration, safeguarding drills and visibility during storm onset. Tool and respirator care. Workers wrapped nasal sinus cloths. Linen squares dampened with vinegar to filter fine dust. Chisels stored in sealed leather sheath. Between shifts, preserving sharpness. Dust, scrubbing stations, pits of water with added sand to absorb clay, cleaned tools and faces before meals. Sea flood extremes and quarry site maintenance. The river's pulse both aided and disrupted extraction. Rapid inundation risks. Unseasonal high floods, often tied to Ethiopian rainfall surges, could submerge quarries beyond expected windows. Quarry overseers maintained sandbag levees around critical bench areas, deploying small boats to evacuate tools and wedges when water breached warning markers. Sediment accumulation and clearing. Floods deposited mud and silt, clogging wedge holes and obscuring seam lines. Post-flood cleaning brigades, mostly youths, spent days excavating and hosing faces with Nile-flowing wooden troughs, restoring ready-to-drill surfaces. Detailed camp memos record average clearance times, 5 days for minor floods, up to 2 weeks after extreme inundations. 4. Innovation and knowledge. Transmission. A. Incremental tool improvements. Faced with persistent challenges, quarry communities refined their equipment over generations. Composite drill shafts. Wood scarcity led to laminated drill shafts, thin palm and acacia planks glued with hide glue resin, offering both flexibility and strength. These composite shafts resisted warp from temperature swings and granted higher torque for drilling deeper holes. Adjustable wedge grooves. Early wedge methods lost efficacy when holes varied slightly in diameter. Carvers introduced groove-carved wedges, wooden strips with shallow flanges, allowing resin to distribute expansion forces more evenly and reducing wedge ejection incidents. B. Apprenticeships and oral codices. Preserving extraction expertise required structured teaching. Ostraka quarries guides. Apprentice scribes inscribed on broken pottery shards. Ostraka, succinct diagrams. Hole spacing grids, wedge insertion depths, seasonal flood thresholds. These guides, distributed at cohort moorings, formed an oral written hybrid codex that distilled empirical rules in portable form. Ceremonial initiations. At the Harvest Moon Festival, newly skilled extractors underwent initiation rites, a symbolic first wedge ceremony where elders recited the Covenant of the Stone, invoking the spirits of mountain and river to bless each apprentice's hands. These performative acts reinforced community identity and ensured ritual recognition of technical milestones. Unresolved point. As you envision drill shafts bowing under pressure, reed screens swaying in desert gales, and apprentices clutching ostraka guides to master wedge timing, ask yourself, how did the continuous interplay of environmental challenges, incremental tool innovations, and structured knowledge transmission sustain Nubian quarry operations? And what can we learn from their adaptive ingenuity when confronting our own modern resource extraction dilemmas? You traced Nubian Sphinx granite from its geologic birth through selection at Jebel Barkal's faces and the exacting extraction techniques used by skilled quarry teams. Now, we witness the last, and arguably most delicate, phase of each block's material journey. its final shaping into the royal Sphinx form, its installation at temple precincts, and the ripples of cultural, economic and environmental change that these enduring stone figures would carry across centuries. I. Arrival and workshop. Preparation on the plateau. A. Unloading and positioning blocks. After grueling riverine and overland haul, blocks reached the plateau's carving terraces. Specialty unloading crews, distinct from extraction teams, oversaw the transition from transport sledges to workshop stocks. Lever and pulley feedback systems, logs laid perpendicular to haul tracks became temporary roller beds. Blocks slid off sledges onto these logs. Then, using tripod-mounted A-frame gantries and rope and pulley arrangements, men guided blocks into precisely measured cradles carved into levelled bedrock. This staging area held 10 to 12 blocks at a time, each awaiting sequential carving, protective covers and weatherproofing. To guard against sudden sandstorms or rare rains, workers draped reed mat tarps over stockpiled blocks. The mat's tight weave shed sand and water, preserving freshly exposed grain patterns until sculptors were ready to commence. B. Final block assessment and marking. Before fine carving began, masters re-evaluated each block's surface. Refined sound tests and micro-inspections. Lead sculptors tapped each face with small bronze hammers, listening for any lingering dullness, an indication of subsurface flaws introduced during transport. Where detected, they marked no-go zones in red ochre, adjusting carving layouts to avoid compromised stone sections. Detailed plan layouts. Using charcoal and straight edges, carvers sketched the Sphinx outline directly on block faces. Chest width, head-to-body ratios, and leg thickness conformed to canonical proportions set by ritual architects. These guidelines referenced scribal diagrams, some preserved on ostraka tablets, assuring that each Nubian Sphinx harmonized with Egyptian aesthetic prescriptions while subtly reflecting local stylistic flourishes. Turn 2. The 5 stages of fine carving, with plans. In place, carving phases unfolded methodically, each demanding specific tools, skills, and ritual attentions. A. Phase 1. Rough modelling and volume establishment. Tool use. Large bronze chisels and flint-edged picks formed broad planes, head helmet shape, shoulders poised like panther's haunches, forelegs grounded in eternal vigilance. Workforce organisation. Crews of 8 to 10 labourers, each overseen by a specialist master, took assigned block faces. They worked in half-day shifts, preventing tool overheating and worker fatigue. Ritual note. Upon completing a block's rough outline, a small libation of Nile water and unguent was poured at its base, consecrating the transition from stone to emerging form. B. Phase 2. Intermediate refinement and anatomical definition. Tool use. Medium-width chisels and abrasive sandstone blocks. Refined musculature. The Sphinx's broad chest, tapered abdomen, and the gentle curve of its haunches. Artistic judgment. Master sculptors employed water incisions, wetting stone surfaces to accentuate grain, and then scoured them with fine quartz sand to reveal subtler contours. Quality control. Daily inspections by the hem. Meroë, master sculptor, ensured symmetry. He used sighting rods and plumb lines at dawn's first light to catch deviations before they became irreversible. C. Phase 3. Fine carving of facial features and mane. Tool use. Delicate bronze and copper chisels, honed to razor edges, carved the Sphinx's serene visage, almond-shaped eyes, feline nose, and the enigmatic half-smile. Separate teams carved the headdress's uraeus, cobra emblem coils, and kingly nemes stripes. Detail techniques. Polishing pads of animal fat and crushed fine sand smoothed facial planes. Flint blades etched hairline grooves in the mane, creating texture that caught flickering torchlight. Ritual note. Carving pauses occurred at midday for the breath of Amun ceremony. Priests chanted hymns beside the nascent Sphinx face, believed to breathe divine life into the stone. D. Phase 4. Inscription and iconographic embellishment. Tool use. Even finer chisels incised hieroglyphic cartouches into the back and sides. Pharaoh's throne name. Epithets invoking protection and fertility. Red ochre or cinnabar pigment was applied to glyphs, making them legible in low light. Local motifs. Nubian contributors added subtle local designs, desert falcons and papyrus clusters, along base friezes, blending regional identity into the imperial iconography. Scriptural precision. Scribes verified each symbol against papyrus templates. Any error could invalidate the Sphinx's ritual efficacy, so mistakes were painstakingly recarved and repainted. E. Phase 5. Polishing, sealing, and final blessing. Tool use. Final polishing used pads of donkey hair dipped in castor oil and fine ash mixtures, creating a gentle sheen. These pads buffed away tool marks and imbued the granite with a tactile smoothness. Protective sealants, a final coating of palm nut lacquer, sealed pores against desert winds. This thin varnish accentuated colour contrasts and preserved carved details. Consecration rites. In a grand ceremony, officiating priests anointed the Sphinx's paws and face with milk and honey libations, uttering spells to bind protective spirits to the statue. Ivory trumpets sounded at sunset, signalling the dawn of the Sphinx's eternal guardianship. 3. Installation, orientation and temple integration. A. Precision placement by foundation engineers. Installing a completed Sphinx demanded exactitude. Foundation. Preparation. Engineers levelled bedrock plinths with sand and crushed stone, then poured lime-based mortars to create flat bedding surfaces. They used sighting frames aligned to temple axes, east-west orientation aligned with solar cycles, to position sphinxes facing the Nile, symbolically greeting each dawn and dusk. Block levelling techniques. Craftsman EMP. Lloyd wedges of ivory and wood, then tapped them gently to fine-tune height. Water-filled measuring troughs confirmed level across the base's four corners. A deviation of even 2 centimetres could distort the statue's gaze when viewed from temple thresholds. B. Spatial and symbolic context. Once in place, sphinxes became active components of temple architecture. Processional avenues, flanking causeways leading to sanctuary entrances, sphinxes projected a corridor of watchful stone eyes. Festival processions passed between their outstretched paws, symbolic guardians guiding offerings to the deity's inner sanctum. Astronomical alignments. Many sphinx rows aligned with solstice sunrise points. At summer solstice, first light glinted off polished chests. At winter solstice, elongated shadows stretched toward temple gates. These alignments reinforced the Sphinx's connection to solar regeneration cycles, integrating divine kingship with natural rhythms. 4. Long-term cultural and environmental impacts. A. Monumental legacy and cultural fusion. Over centuries, Jebel Barkal's sphinxes shaped regional identity. Pilgrimage. Destinations. Nubian pilgrims journeyed from Kerma and Meroë, offering bread and incense at sphinx altars. Their art and pottery show sphinx motifs, signalling a shared reverence across ethnic lines. Architectural imitations. Secondary workshops carved smaller sphinx sculptures for local shrines, adapting forms for domestic courtyards. These replicas, often in softer sandstone, underscore the sphinx's diffusion beyond imperial grandiosity into everyday religious life. B. Environmental footprint and sustainability lessons. The Sphinx building enterprise also left environmental legacies. Deforestation for fire setting. Fire setting demands consumed palm and tamarisk wood, contributing to localized deforestation. Later quarry administrators restrict wood use and emphasized mechanical extraction to safeguard riparian vegetation. Flood basin modifications.
Earthen roads and causeways altered seasonal flood flows, prompting minor shifts in silt deposition. Temple engineers later built drainage channels, amphitheater-style basins to divert floodwaters, integrating water management solutions directly into monumental landscapes. Thought-provoking reflection as you recall the final chiseling of serene sphinx faces, the precise leveling of massive stone bodies, and the centuries of devotion that kept their gaze eternal. Consider this. How do large-scale human projects, ranging from ancient monuments to modern infrastructure, shape both cultural identities and ecological contexts? And in what ways might we balance our creative ambitions with long-term environmental stewardship for generations yet to come? Hey everyone, dim your lights and get comfortable as we uncover the human networks behind Nubian sphinx carving, far from lone geniuses chiseling in silence. These gargantuan sculptures emerged from a web of families, apprentices, and overseers bound by oath and tradition. If you're enjoying this voyage into sleepy history, please like and subscribe, and tell me where you're tuning in from. Tonight, we explore how the quarry and plateau camps structured their labor, the evolution from kin-based workshops to formal guilds, the transmission of specialized skills through secret rites, and the social contracts written on astraca and sealed with libations that held it all together. In this first section, you'll meet the founding lineages of Nubian stonecraft, learn how families claimed carving stalls at temple workshops, and discover the covenants of apprenticeship that bound young talents to masters for years. You'll see how distinctions between master carvers, journeymen, and laborers shaped daily rhythms, regulated wages in grain and beer, and governed restitution when tools or reputations broke. By the end, you'll understand that these great monuments were as much social feats as they were technical marvels, born not by individual hands alone, but by generations of craftsmen, linked in hierarchies more intricate than any sphinx labyrinth. lineage workshops and the foundations of guild structure long before formal guild charters appeared. Nubian carving traditions circulated within extended families, patrilineal clans whose identities intertwined with stonecraft, are family lineages as early workshops, hereditary carving seats certain clans, traced their origins to legendary master carvers cited in temple inscriptions. These families held exclusive rights to specific stalls or workbenches carved into the temple. Terrace walls prime spots near water channels for easy tool cooling and block access. Oral genealogies and craft myths at seasonal feasts. Elders recounted how Ramos I unearthed the first Sphinx blocks and taught his sons Gem Meroë master of forms. These genealogies reinforced claims only Ramos's descendants could occupy the southern bench reserved for preliminary head carving, cementing social status through stone. B. Transition to formal guilds. Royal decrees and guild formation. The reign of Pharaoh Amenhotep IV. Growing Sphinx programs prompted bureaucratic codification. Decrees inscribed on temple walls recognized for major guilds, quarry extractors, block haulers, rough modelers, and finishing masters. Each guild elected a Cadic judge to arbitrate disputes and represent members at the king's court. Guild charters on Ostrakabruk pottery shards found near Jebel Barkal bear prototype charters, listing guild membership roles, dues in barley, and penalties for absenteeism. These early documents formalized obligations. Extractors supplied 15 blocks monthly, haulers moved 10, modelers delivered 5 rough sphinxes, and masters completed 3 polished statues. Roadshows, reflecting labor intensity and skill hierarchy. 2. Apprenticeship contracts and skill transmissions. Been central to guild life were the apprenticeship bonds that channeled raw talent into refined mastery. A. The 3-phase apprenticeship. Model novitiate Yamgir. Years 1 to 3, young novices, often sons of guild members, age 10 to 13, committed to 3-year contracts. They learned basic quarry tasks, sand sweeping, tool preparation, and simple chisel maintenance. In return, masters fed them porridge, taught basic safety rituals, and introduced guild symbols. Journeyman Yomka. Years 4 to 7 AS. Journeyman. Adolescents graduated to more skilled roles, marking block outlines, wielding medium chisels under supervision, and assisting in rough modeling. They received modest grain stipends and occasional beer rations. Importantly, journeymen participated in guild councils, learning, negotiation, and dispute resolution. Master-in-training Gem Meroë. Years 8 to 10. The final phase immersed trainees in fine carving and ritual rites. Under a master carver's direct tutelage, they practiced facial features on spare blocks, learned pigment mixing for inscriptions, and underwent secrecy oaths during full moon knife blessing ceremonies that symbolized their transition to full mastership. Be binding oaths and ritual secrecio straka. Oaths. Apprentices inscribed oaths on a straka. I Nemehit, son of Ramos, vow to serve my master in tooth and nail for 10 years, to guard his chisels and to reveal no carving secrets. Breaking these oaths incurred heavy fines, 20 jars of barley, or expulsion from guild workshops. Full moon knife blessing ceremonies at the end of training. Initiates knelt before the master's bench during a full moon vigil. The master traced the apprentice's chisel with sacred oils, recited prayers invoking Ptah. The craftsman goddened, cut a ceremonial notch on the apprentice's chisel handle. This public rite confirmed new status and conferred rights to carve. Master-level commissions. 3. Guild hierarchies, wages, and penalties. Clear status, distinctions within guild structured daily life, resource allocation, and conflict management, a rank insignia and work allocation. And symbols. Masters wore linen kilts with dyed crimson hems and bronze armbands stamped with their guild emblem. Journeymen donned ochre-smeared tunics and carried small satchels for chisels, while novices wore plain white smocks and apprentices' caps woven from palm fibers. These visual codes directed observers who could carve inscriptions, who hauled blocks, and who only swept the floor. Task rosters on Ostrako. Weekly rosters inscribed on Astroka and posted at temple gates assigned tasks and work zones. Masters reserved south-facing benches for facework. Journeymen rotated between flank and paw sections, while novices prepared pigment and cleaned tools. B. Wages, rations, and reward systems. Grain and beer rations payments followed a tiered scale. Masters received 40 Cs of barley and 6 jugs of beer per month. Journeymen 25 Cs and 4 jugs. Novices 10 Cs and 2 jugs. These staples sustained laborers through punishing gravel lifts and desert dust storms. Bonus blocks and honor rolls exceeding monthly block quotas earned extra rations and placement on the honor Astroka public records of exceptional service. Those listed received communal feasts and palm wreath crowns during seasonal festivals, reinforcing competitive spirit and communal ESTEMC. Penalty code and dispute resolution. Infractions and fines. Common infractions: absenteeism, tool damage, or theft of pigment. Incurred fines ranging from grain confiscation to forced night shift labor. Severe breaches, for example, revealing carving secrets, led to temporary expulsion and loss of guild privileges. Guild courts and Katic adjudications as Spasova block assignments or wage discrepancies appeared before the Katic in monthly council sessions. Both parties presented witness testimonies. Judgments, recorded on stone slabs, were enforced by foremen, underscoring trust in communal governance. Unresolved question: as you visualize novices kneeling under moonlit rites, journeymen haggling over block quotas, and masters arguing tool compensation in guild councils. Consider this. How did the formal structures, lineage workshops evolving into guild charters, apprenticeship oaths, and penal codes balance individual ambition with communal cohesion, ensuring that Nubian Sphinx carving remained both a personal calling and a shared cultural enterprise? You explored how Nubian stonecraft evolved from familial lineages into structured guilds, each with its hierarchy of masters, journeymen, and novices governed by oaths, scribbled on astraca and consecrated in moonlit ceremonies. Now, in Section 2, we peer inside the guild's day-to-day workings, the granular division of carving labor, the intricate resource-sharing economies that sustained workshops, and the tacit networks of mutual aid that bridged quarry camps and plateau studios. You'll learn how block-by-block carving quotas translated into grain and beer wages, how tool-forging cooperatives balanced supply and demand, and how informal mentorships and cross-guild alliances wove an invisible web of collaboration that the colossal task of sculpting royal sphinxes could proceed. Stone by stone, from dawn's first chisel strike to the final polish at dusk, division of carving labor, specialized roles and collaborative stages even within a single guild set. The rough modeler's work divided into specialized stations. Understanding these roles reveals how carving efficiency rose without sacrificing quality. A master modelers in proportion. Experts block orientation and proportional frameworks. Each block's orientation on the workbench was critical. Master modelers first established the Sphinx's central axis by hanging a plumb line from the workshop roof. Using sighting rods, they marked datum points for shoulder width, chest depth, and flank curvature directly onto the stone with charcoal. These reference marks, visible even after layer upon layer of chiseling, ensured consistency across multiple sphinxes carved in parallel. Scaling templates and measurement grids. Masters possessed wooden templates, thin, arch-shaped gauges corresponding to head-to-body ratios that they pressed against rough surfaces to verify curvature. Composite measurement grids, carved into live tree trunks at the camp edge, provided visual guides for novices to memorize proportions before approaching the bench. Quality control rounds, twice daily. Senior masters toured each modeler's bench, comparing emerging volumes with design schematic. Deviations over 2 centimeters triggered immediate corrective orders. Recut the left shoulder plane to 1.2 cubits, noted on astraca and delivered by junior foreman, ensuring real-time oversight. B. Journeymen, detail carvers and surface artisans, anatomical feature specialist. Journeymen often specialized further, some focused on feline musculature, others on paw articulation, still others on main texture. Each journeyman bench displayed reference carvings, small relief blocks depicting idealized sphinx, features in miniature against which they matched their evolving work. Surface smoothing and abrasion teams before polishing. Surface artisans used flat sandstone blocks textured on one side with seawater mixed sand, smooth on the other to scrape away chisel rip marks. These artisans rotated among multiple benches, evening out inconsistencies and preparing surfaces for masters' fine chiseling. Pigment application. Apprentice oversights. Journeymen also mentored pigment apprentices, young workers who mixed powder, pigment cinnabar for inscriptions, lapis lazuli dust for scarab, eyes, and applied test swatches to carved recesses. Journeymen judged color consistency and recorded pigment ratios on astraca, feeding this empirical data back to master pigmenters. C. Novices, tool bearers and material keepers. Shizeland pick custodians. Novices bore the daily responsibility of collecting, cleaning, and distributing the chisels and picks needed at each bench. They inventoried tools each dawn, oiling bronze edges with a goat fat and beeswax salve, and returned them at dusk to locked tool chests guarded by watchful JOURNEYMEN. Sand and water suppliers. Sane constant flow of fine sand and water sustained the abrasion teams. Novices maintained adjacent troughs of Nile water heated by small fires in winter to prevent freezing, and dry basins of sifted river sand, ensuring that journeymen never paused for lack of materials. Waste management. Scribes recording dust, volumes, and discarded chiseled shrapnel. Novices tracked material waste on leather-bound ledgers. These records informed resource allocation decisions. If sand consumption spiked by 10% in 1 week, overseers investigated potential tool damage or shifts in surface polishing techniques to resource-sharing economies. Grain, buyer, and the circuits of exchange guilds operated not in isolation but within a broader economy of exchange, trading labor, materials, and finished products to sustain all participants. A grain and beer ration system's monthly wage allocation. Described in Section 1, masters, journeymen, and novices received tiered rations, but distribution followed a sliding scale linked to individual performance. Exceeding quotas by 10% earned a 5 seer bonus of barley. while falling short by 5% incurred. A 2-seer deduction. Buyer allotments, considered a morale reward, doubled during festival months, reinforcing seasonal production surges. Guild-controlled granaries adjacent to temple courtyards stored up to 10,000 seahs of barley under wooden lids, sealed with goat-hide straps. Access required dual signatures, master and caddick, preventing unauthorized withdrawals. Quarterly audits by temple stewards ensured transparency, their records inscribed on large stone stele visible to all guild members. Peer lending circles, bread and stone funds, recognizing life's uncertainties, familial deaths, crop failures. Guild members formed informal lending circles, a bread fund for grain loans and a stone fund for supplemental block quotas when extraction slowed. Contributions 1 CA per month grew. Interest at 2% quarterly, payable in kind or additional labor contributions, reflecting communal solidarity. B. Tool and material cooperatives. Central Toolforge Consortium instead of each workshop maintaining its own blacksmith guilds pooled resources to fund a central toolforge. Resident blacksmiths rotated annually, resharpened chisels, RECAST broken picks, and experimented with alloy adjustments. Toolforge output quotas appeared on astraca posted at each camp entrance, detailing turnaround times and daily capacity limits. Pigment androgen guilds, separate but interlinked guilds, managed pigment preparation and resin production. Pigment guild members bartered processed cinnabar and ochre to carving guilds in exchange for grain and beer. Resin guild specialists, knowledge keepers of tree tapping and honeybee. Hive management provided wedge soaking materials essential for extraction work. Reciprocal gift exchanges, elaborate gift rituals sealed interguild alliances. At the year's turn, carving masters offered small, finely carved statuettes to pigment guild overseers. Pigmenters reciprocated with dyed linen cloths and special incense blends. These exchanges, documented on astraca as reciprocity rounds, ensured mutual dependence and trust. Asterisk 3. Cross-guild collaborations and knowledge networks beyond formal economic transactions. Loose networks of collaboration, often guilds and camps, TOGETHERA, mentorship bridges across guilds, master-to-master knowledge sharing once annually. Each guild caddick hosted a symposium. Masters of carving, extractors, hollers, and finishers convened at the chief temple hall. They exchanged technical tips, sand polishing ratios, wedge expansion timings, or pigment binding agents, while priests offered ritual blessings for continued cooperation. Journeymen exchanges. Journeymen sometimes spent weeks embedded in other guilds, a journeyman carver assisting in quarry extraction, learning joint detection techniques, or a quarry journeyman volunteering in the finisher's studio to hone aphrodite skills. These cross-pollination stints, though unpaid, enriched skill sets and fostered interguild empathy. B. Knowledge transmission beyond borders into regional stonecraft. Councils, representatives from Nile sites Jebel Barkal, Jebel Dosha, and Wadi Isabu met biennially under royal auspices, sharing new findings. Their decrees inscribed on temple walls standardized carving proportions across regions, ensuring a recognized Nubian Sphinx style despite local variations. Astraca knowledge repositories in major settlements. Libraries of astraca clustered by topic: extraction formulas, carving proportions, pigment mixtures, loud reference by traveling carvers. Though fragile, these repositories, curated by senior masters, functioned as early technical manuals, preserved through designated apprentices who safeguarded them in sealed clay jars. IV seasonal rituals, binding labor and spiritual practice. Guild economies and collaboration thrived within a framework of regular communal rituals. Ceremonies that re-anchored labor in sacred time. A weekly stone blessing ceremonies. Friday evening rituals. Each Friday, workers paused at dusk for the stone blessing. Priests led robes-clad carvers to a small shrine housing a libation stone. Offerings of date wine and barley cakes were placed in carved niches, and a collective prayer intoned in low chant asked Pata and Kuno to grant safe hands and crack-free stone. Communal feast and performance after prayers. A modest feast unfolded. Stewed lentils, spiced fish, and flatbreads shared among guilds. Drummers and flautists performed, and dancers enacted the drama of the mountain's birth, storytelling that reminded laborers of their craft's deeper cosmological roots. B. Annual Carvers Jubilee Festival. Guild honor rolls and public recognition on New Year's Day flood. Temples hosted the Carvers Jubilee. Outstanding guild members, those listed on honor astraca, received ceremonial wreaths, extra beer, and elevated seating at temple ceremonies. Their names were chanted by choir boys and added to permanent stone roll slabs, ensuring their feats echoed across generations. Renewal of oaths and tool blessings, or masters and journeymen reenacted their apprenticeship oaths before the caddick and priests, reaffirming commitments. Tools underwent blessing, chisels were dipped in sacred oil, and new wedges ritually consecrated, aligning each guild's material instruments with divine favor for the coming year. Unresolved thought as you consider block-by-block quotas, weighed against grain rations, the communal tool forges humming at dawn, and the echoing choruses that paused sharp chisels for shared prayer. Reflect on this. What hidden economies of trust, reciprocity, and ritual that underpin large-scale human endeavors might we uncover in our own societies? And how might recognizing these invisible threads deepen our appreciation for collaboration amid complexity? You've traced Nubian stonecraft from family workshops to formal guild hierarchies, witnessed the precise division of labor in carving crews, and explored the rich economies of grain, beer, and reciprocal exchange that sustained thousands of hands and chisels. In this final chapter of Story 3, we bring the narrative full circle, from the guild's internal orchestration to their outward legacy, how master carvers trained future generations, how their institutional frameworks shaped the very aesthetic of Nubian sphinxes, and how the guild model influenced social organization long after the chisels fell silent, through the lens of apprenticeship completion rites, monumental dedications, and the guild's enduring imprint on regional culture. You'll see that these organizations did more than sculpt stone. They carved a path for communal creativity and resilience that resonates across millennia. Completion rites and ascension to mastery. The final examination block after years of apprenticeship and journeyman service. Only a few candidates advanced to full master status. Their final test was both technical and ritual. Concealed prototype carving aspirants were presented with a raw block unseen by others, its grain pattern and fissure layout unique. Over the course of a month and often under moonlit supervision, they had to model and refine a small sphinx relief on this block, demonstrating mastery of proportion, tool control, and stylistic nuance. Guild Council Assessment. A panel of senior masters convened in the temple workshop, reviewing each prototype against canonical standards, facial symmetry, pore musculature, and inscription legibility. Mistakes like misaligned hieroglyphs or uneven shoulder planes mandated further refinement. Success was celebrated with communal feasts and the awarding of the master's palm wreath and acacia of crown, symbolizing both artistic achievement and full guild. MEMBERSHIPB, transformation of status and responsibilities. New masters assumed critical roles. Workshop leadership. Each newly minted master inherited a carving stall or quarry zone, along with a small team of journeymen and novices. Their name, inscribed on bronze plaques at workshop entrances, guaranteed first rights to prestigious temple commissions. Mentorship obligations. Masters pledged to train at least 2 new apprentices within 3 years, ensuring continuous skill transmission. Failure to fulfill mentorship duties risked demotion, a fine equivalent to 40 Cs of grain, or public rebuke by the catech, underscoring communal accountability. Guild influence on monumental style and regional culture. The guild's collective expertise left indelible marks on Nubian Sphinx iconography and BEYONDA standardization of aesthetic norms through guild charters and interregional councils. Carvers established enduring style guides. Proportion canon. The Jebel Barkal canon codified head-to-body ratios 1:5 cubits and specific main patterns, 5 alternating ridges signifying the 5 flood stages. These conventions ensured sphinxes from different quarries presented a unified visual language, reinforcing state power through aesthetic consistency. Regional variations within a unified framework while maintaining core proportions. Local guilds introduced subtle flourishes. Northern workshops added red pattern headdresses, reflecting Nile Delta iconography. Southern teams incised desert scallop motifs along pore bases, celebrating Nubian identity. These localized variants, sanctioned by guild councils, enriched the broader Sphinx repertoire. Cultural practices beyond stone carving. World organization inspired social structures across Nubia, adoption in textile and metalwork. Guild collectives in Kerma mirrored stonecraft hierarchies, master weavers, journeyman stitchers, and novice loom. They borrowed apprenticeship models, oath ceremonies, and even joint benefit funds, adapting quarry cooperatives. Economic frameworks to fabric production. Civic administration templates. Local councils leveraged guild-based governance for civic tasks, canal maintenance, market regulation, and religious festival planning, drawing on the Cadix dispute resolution methods to adjudicate community disputes beyond workshops. III decline, transformation, and enduring legacies. As political and environmental shifts transformed Nubia, guilds adapted, faded, or found new expressions. A late period, transformations. Erosion under foreign rule during Ptolemaic influence, and later under Roman administration. State patronage shifted focus to temples in Lower Egypt. Quarry guilds at Jebel Barkal saw diminished commissions. Many masters migrated north to Alexandria, blending Nubian carving techniques with Hellenistic sculpture crafts. Guild records and the archaeological record Ostraka charters and workshop rolled slabs, repurposed as paving stones in later rebuilds, survived in fragmentary form. Rediscovery by 19th century explorers illuminated guild structures. Modern epigraphers have pieced together membership lists and apprenticeship lineages from these shards, reconstructing ancient social networks. Modern rediscovery and cultural revival. Contemporary craft collectives in 21st century Sudan. Cultural associations have re-established carving cooperatives inspired by ancient guilds. They revive apprenticeship covenants, host carving symposiums, and publish Jebel Barkal canons online, ensuring that traditional ratios and motifs guide new generations. UNESCO Intangible Heritage Inclusion in 2020. Sudan nominated Nubian Stonecraft Guild practices for UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage list. The inclusion recognized apprenticeship rights, guild governance, and communal economies as cultural treasures, fostering international support for heritage workshops along the Nile. Thought-provoking reflection as you reflect on the guild's layered hierarchies, from hidden family lineages to formal charters posted on Astraka, and envision the collaborative choreography of masters, journeymen, and novices shaping timeless sphinxes. Consider this. What lessons might our modern professions, whether in technology, art, or industry, draw from ancient guild systems that balance skill specialization? Hey everyone. Settle in and dim the lights as we explore the humble yet indispensable tools that shaped Nubian Sphinx bronze chisels, flint picks, and the vibrant red ochre polishes that revealed every carved detail. If you enjoy this quiet journey through ancient craftsmanship, please like and subscribe. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's wonderful to connect across time zones. Tonight we turn our gaze from massive granite blocks to the slender implements in carvers' hands. In this section, you'll trace the gradual transformation of rockworking technology, how early quarrymen relied on stone and bone tools, how bronze metallurgy revolutionized carving precision, and how craftsmen mastered the art of tool sharpening and surface polishing with red ochre mixtures. You'll meet itinerant metal workers who purified copper ore by the Nile's floodplain, follow apprentices learning the delicate angles of chisel faces, and witness the daily rituals of tool care, firing, and dressing actions every bit as vital as the chiseling itself. As you envision sparks flying from struck bronze and red paste highlighting sharp edges, consider how these unassuming tools carried the weight of empire and artistry alike. From stone and bone to metal. Innovation long before bronze found its way into Nubian workshops. Early carvers made do with local materials. Understanding this evolution illuminates the leap in carving finesse and speed that bronze chisels afforded. Pre-bronze implements, flint quartz and antler picks, flint-edged picks, flint nodules gathered from nearby wadis were napped into durable picks. Apprentices learned the subtle percussion technique, using hammerstones of basalt to produce edges that could chip away at weathered granite seams. Flint's brittleness demanded frequent retipping, so carvers carried spare flint flakes in leather pouches, trading them at campsite workshops when dull quartz abrasive blocks, coarse-grained quartz chunks eroded from upstream. Granite outcrops served as primitive Early sculptors rubbed these blocks against carved surfaces to smooth rough planes, an effort that foreshadowed later red ochre polishing. While slow and laborious, this method demonstrated an acute understanding of differential hardness and, where patterns on stone, antler and bone handles where metal was scarce, bone and antler picks often crafted from elk or gazelle remains provided resilient edges. Their fibrous, slightly flexible cores resisted shattering, ideal for delicate. These organic implements were key in defining early Sphinx prototypes. Their traces still visible in lower relief carvings on temple relief blocks. Introduction of copper and the advent of bronze by the late Middle Kingdom period. Nubia. Contacts with Egyptian copper mines and Mediterranean traders brought metallurgical know-how to the Nile's southern reaches. Copper smelting along the Nile's seasonal floodwaters deposited alluvial copper ores near riverbanks. Metal workers built small pit furnaces, clay-lined shafts reinforced with pomston briquettes fueled by charcoal from tamarisk wood. Temperatures above 10 °C were achieved by hand-blown bellows made of animal hide. These smelting camps dotted the floodplain, their slag heaps still visible to the archaeologist's eye. Alloying to create bronze-pure copper chisels proved too soft for repeated granite strikes. Artisans discovered that adding 10 to 15% tin imported via Red Sea trade routes yielded a harder, more resilient bronze. Tin crucibles served as alloying vessels. Master metallurgists calibrated ratios by color and spark test scoper alone. Glowed red under a strike, whereas bronze produced bright, whitish sparks. Casting and forging techniques. Bronze chisels emerged from lost wax casting methods. Clay molds formed around beeswax prototypes, heated to drain wax, and then filled with molten bronze. After cooling, chisels were extracted, trimmed, and annealed in lo-fi kilns to relieve brittleness. Final shaping employed grinding stones, giving chisels their characteristic flat bevels and precise cutting angles. 2. Chisel anatomy and functional design. Not all bronze chisels were alike. Their designs reflected the variety of carving tasks from deep roughing to fine detailing. The chisel types and their uses. Roughing chisels, wet-edge broad-bladed chisels, 5 to 8 centimeters wide, featured thick shafts reinforced with additional bronze at the haft end. Used for removing large stone volumes, they worked in tandem with mallets of sycamore wood. Apprentices wielded these under master's supervision, their wide strikes setting the Sphinx's general planes. Modeling chisels and Meroë. medium-width chisels, 2 to 4 centimeters, handled intermediate carving, refining limbs and back planes. Their blades narrowed gradually, offering control over curvature. Journeymen favored these for defining musculature, switching to narrower tools as forms neared final shape. Detailed chisels, Meroë sashepu, slim chisels sometimes under 1 centimeter wide, required careful handling. Masters used these to incise facial features, headdress stripes, and hieroglyph outlines. Their blades extended from thin tangs, anchored in turned wooden handles wrapped with sinew for grip. Ergonomics honed over centuries, pointed gunders and drill bits for undercut areas between paws or beneath chin. Pointed gunders, long tapered chisels, and bronze drill bits allowed access. These tools extended sculptors' reach into shadowed crevices, enabling relief carving without scaffolding repositioning. B. Edge, geometry and tool. Maintenance efficiency hinged on precise edge angles, craft knowledge inscribed in muscle memory, and apprenticeship lore. Bevel angle standardization. Roughing chisels maintained bevels between 30-35, balancing sharpness with durability. Modeling chisels beveled at 25 to 30 maximized control, while detailed chisels sharpened to 22.2. Beveled edges for micro-precision. Apprentices used small whetstone trace pools of Nile water atop sandstone slabs to hone edges in situ, sharpening rituals and polishing at dawn and dusk. Toolcare squads of a novice craftsman rotated through sharpening stations. Fresh bristles of fine sand and olive oil mixtures wetted edges. Occasionally, chisels were ceremonially soaked in palm nut oil before festivals. Symbolic re-anointing, linking metal tools with sacred carving rites. 3. The red ochre polishing. Traditionized chiseling unveiled form. The application of red ochre paste transformed rough stone into luminous surfaces, enhancing visibility and sealing. Prusa sourcing and preparation of ochre. Mine workings. Deposits of hematite-rich ochre lay inland from Jebel Barkal, accessible via narrow foot. Miners extracted earthy masses, which apprentices crushed in granite mortars, sieving the powder to under 0.5 millimeters grain for uniform application. Mixing paste with animal fat or pigment mixed with rendered sheep fat or goat tallow created a malleable paste. Masters calibrated oil-to-powder ratios roughly 1:1 by weight, adjusting for humidity. In dry conditions, more fat prevented flaking. In damp months, higher pigment content maintained. Color vibrancy. B. Application techniques and functional benefits. Surface, sealing, and contrast. Enhancement. Craftsmen brushed paste onto carved sphinx faces and inscription recesses, then buffed surfaces with palm fiber pads. The ochre filled microfissures, reducing dust erosion and accentuating chiseling lines under torches. Visual effect, allowing priests and visitors to read hieroglyphs even in low light. Ritual significance beyond practical use. Red ochre symbolized the lifeblood of the Nile, its hue echoing sunrise on water. During dedication ceremonies, high priests applied ochre streaks to sphinx paws, invoking rejuvenation and linking stone guardians to the cycle of rebirth. Maintaining polished stone. Periodic reapplication, oftentimes to the annual flood, receding protective layers washed away by drifting sand and wind. Toolcare teams coordinated these refresh campaigns, allocating red ochre rations based on sphinx prominence and exposure for tool workshops and the itinerant metal worker. The complex choreography of tool production and maintenance followed its own itineraries. A mobile forge caravans, riverine blacksmith vessels. Metal workers traveled by small falaka boats, carrying portable forges, clay brazier pits, and bellows made from donkey hide bags. They followed Nile trade routes, stopping at quarry and plateau camps to resharpen tools, cast new chisels from ingot stocks, and deliver replacement drill bits. Seasonal stationing during low Nile phases. Forge caravans settled at fixed workshops near major camps. Here they collected worn chisels, processed new bronze ingots purchased in bulk from southern foundries, and trained apprentices in metallurgical techniques, ensuring tool life cycles kept pace with carving demands. B. Knowledge exchange between metal and stoneworkers. Collaborative innovation sessions. Quarterly gatherings brought master carvers and metalworkers together. Carvers articulated tool performance issues, edge, retention, brittleness, and metallurgists adjusted alloy compositions or heat treatment protocols. Minutes sketched on Astraka guided future casting improvements. Cross-training and dual apprenticeships. Some promising apprentices pursued dual tracks, year-long rotations in forge work followed by return to carving benches. These art became invaluable liaisons, smoothing innovations between stonecraft and metallurgy, and are credited in later papyri with first mentions of composite bronze steel tools centuries ahead of their time. Unresolved question as you envision quarries echoing with flint strikes, forges glowing against Nile dusk, and carvers buffing red ochre paste into granite pores. Consider this: in what ways do the tools we wield and the care we invest in them shape not only our creations but our collective identities? And how might modern artisans rekindle the intimate relationship between maker and instrument that defined the Nubian sculptor's world? You learned how Nubian carvers transitioned from flint and bone implements to finely wrought bronze chisels and mastered red ochre polishing to seal and accentuate every sculpted line. Now, you'll step inside the bustling tool workshops and explore the economic webs, the communal rhythms, and the unforeseen trials that shaped every artisan's day. You'll follow itinerant metalworkers as they navigated treacherous Nile currents to service camps, witness apprentices balancing quarry duties with tool forging, and confront the relentless demands of maintenance when furnace embers flickered. Look, through these stories, you will see that mastery of the chisel was inextricably bound to a broader tapestry of trade, craft specialization and ingenuity in the face of scarcity. The heart of the forge workshop life by the Nile, workshop layout and daily routine by dawn's first light. The half-mobile forge caravans, mud brick kilns mounted on reed barges nudged against riverbanks near temple terraces. Each workshop comprised a smelting pit, a circular clay furnace, sunk into packed sand, lined with basalt stones, brimmed with glowing charcoal. Metalworkers' faces smudged with soot-tended bellows crafted from cured goatskins, fanning flames above 10 degrees Celsius to melt bronze ingots into molten pools. Anvil and quenching trough nearby. Flat granite slabs served as anvils, chisels emerging from the furnace laid briefly on these stones for initial shaping, then plunged into water and/or quenching troughs that tempered the bronze, hardening edges against fracturing. The sharpening station. A low bench held a slab of fine-grained sandstone dipped in Nile water. Artisans sat cross-legged, guiding chisels along the stone's beveled surface back and forth to hone precise cutting angles. Apprentices circulated clean water, wiping metal shavings from tools and collecting them for recycling. Work proceeded in rhythmic shifts. Smelters labored until mid-morning, forging fresh edges for the day's roughing chisels. Sharpeners then assumed focus, while the final detail tools waited their turn under the watchful eye of master toolsmiths. By dusk, every piece of metal bore the hallmark of fresh fire and careful abrasion, ready to rejoin carving crews at first light. Seasonal mobility and riverine supply chains. The forges' mobility allowed them to follow the flooding cycles, high water campaigns. During inundation, the forges floated upriver to remote quarry camps, where extraction teams strained to keep pace with carving quotas despite swollen currents. Metalworkers tethered barges to tamarisk groves, venturing ashore daily to serve chisel needs and barter bronze scraps for local provisions. Low-water winter workshops. When waters receded, workshops moored permanently at temple terraces. The broader reach enabled blacksmiths to consolidate operation stockpiling ingots brought by land caravans and training larger cohorts of apprentices, preparing tool inventories for the next flood season. This riverine choreography exemplified the intimate link between tool production and the Nile's rhythm. Seasonal dance ensuring carving artisans never faced idle chisels. The economics of Napata craft guild funds and resource scarcity. Bronze as currency and exchange. Bronze, though vital, was a relatively scarce commodity. The metal's value permeated workshop economies. Ingot barter rates. Official temple ledgers recorded bronze ingot prices in seas of barley and jugs of beer, about 1 ingot per 20 seas and 3 jugs. Masters negotiated bulk discounts when commissioning dozens of chisels, sometimes trading finished stone reliefs or inscription services in lieu of full payment, illustrating a complex interdependence between carving and smithing guilds. Recycling and alloy recovery. Worn or broken chisels marked with hammer, dents beyond repair, were collected and melted down to recover metal. Apprentices sorted bronze from copper scraps and tin residues, ensuring minimal waste. This recycling ethos preserved finite metal supplies and underscored the value placed on every ounce of bronze. Guild funds and tool lending libraries. Recognizing collective needs, carving guilds established tool lending libraries. Membership contributions. Masters contributed a portion of their monthly bronze rations, often one finished chisel per quarter, into a communal repository. Journeymen added smaller tools and filing stones. In return, carvers in need could borrow replacement implements at no upfront cost, returning them after repairs and logging usage in guild ledgers. Maintenance and upkeep committees. Elected journeymen formed small committees overseeing library inventories, scheduling, sharpening rotations, and coordinating forge visits. Their responsibilities extended to resolving conflicts if a member lost a chisel. They repaid the repository with extra labor or pledged a future carving session to the toolsmith's workshop. This shared infrastructure democratized access to high-quality tools, preventing tool scarcity from becoming a bottleneck in the monumental carving process. 3. Apprentices at the anvil, balancing quarry and forge. Dual apprenticeships and cross-training bind the carving-only track. Some apprentices undertook dual roles, split days at camp. On alternate days, apprentices rotated between quarry extraction duties and forge workshops. Morning hours spent chiseling, at the cliff were balanced with afternoon forging sessions. This cross-training enriched their understanding of metal properties, improving chisel usage and maintenance when back at the carving bench. Master Toolsmith mentorship, promising apprentices gained direct mentorship under master smiths, learning to pour small test casts and experiment with alloy ratios. While the bulk of tool production remained in specialist hands, these artisan scholars functioned as liaisons, innovators capable of tailoring chisels to carvers' evolving needs. B. The personal chisel and its legacy. A chisel often became an apprentice's most prized possession, naming and consecration. Upon mastering basic forging techniques, an apprentice's first self-made chisel received a personal name, often invoking craft gods or revered ancestors, and underwent a brief blessing ceremony. This consecration forged an emotional bond, motivating care and diligence, inheritance and family lineage. When apprentices advanced to journeyman or master status, they passed down these personal chisels to their own trainees or family members, inscribing handles with initials or simple glyphic emblems. Archaeological finds of chisels bearing intertwining name glyphs reveal these intimate lineages, a testament to individual craftsmanship amid collective enterprise for crisis and innovation. Responding to scarcity and disaster amid stable systems, unexpected disruptions tested the workshop's resilience, tin shortages and alloy adaptations, Mediterranean trade interruptions, periodic cessations in Red Sea trade due to political turmoil or piracy inhibited tin imports. Facing declining supplies, smiths adjusted alloy formulas, blending higher copper with locally sourced arsenic or small amounts of gold dust from Nubian mines, producing alternative bronzes with varied hardness and color, experimental edge treatments to compensate for softer alloys. Smiths experimented with edge hardening techniques, quenching chisels in goose fat infused with mineral salts, or tempering them in loxygen pits to achieve martensitic-like structures. While trial and error caused occasional tool failures, these innovations maintained carving momentum during resource scarcities, beef-induced forge damage and rapid redeployment, workshop flooding events, unseasonal floods, sometimes inundated, forge barges, quenching furnaces and rusting stored tools. Metalworkers instituted quick response protocols. Floating tool caches stored in watertight clay jars were deployed first, while emergency makeshift forges dug above predicted flood lines restored basic sharpening functions within days. Mobile repair teams, specialized repair squads traversed between camps, equipped with portable bellows and collapsible clay crucibles. Their arrival within 24 hours of a flood's retreat minimized work stoppage, illustrating a flexible network of itinerant craftsmanship built into the workshop system. The human toll and everyday triumphs beyond technical and economic structures. Workshop life exacted personal costs and fostered communal pride. A. Health hazards and protective practice. Mismal fume exposure, smelting bronze, released toxic arsenic and tin oxides. Metal workers developed rudimentary masks of woven reeds dampened with water and vinegar, reducing inhalation of noxious vapors. Over time, community health scribes noted declines in respiratory ailments where mask use became widespread. Burns and accident care. Hot metal spills caused frequent burns. Herbalists administered poultices of crushed lotus. Stalk is known for anti-inflammatory properties and bandaged wounds with linen strips coated in honey. Apprentices documented healing times on Astraca, gradually refining treatment protocols through collective experience. B. Moments of craft. Pride Festival tool display. During the annual Carver's Jubilee, workshops displayed their finest chisels, with guild crests and family emblems in temple courtyards. Visitors marveled at intricately fluted handles and finely ground edges, symbols of both technical prowess and communal collaboration. Master-apprentice showcases and small mid-season ceremonies. Master smiths and their apprentices demonstrated casting and carving side by side. The sight of a novice successfully tapping out a clean bronze chisel after months of training drew applause, renewing collective faith in the guild's regenerative capacity. Unresolved point. As you picture the forge's glow flickering across river waters, apprentices dividing time between quarries and kilns, and master smiths innovating under duress. Ask yourself, what modern parallels exist in our own complex supply chains and specialized professions? And how might the Nubian workshops' blend of mobility, mutual aid, and inventive adaptation inspire resilient practices in today's artisanal and industrial crafts? You traced the evolution of Nubian carving implements from flint picks and bone tools, through the advent of bronze chisels and redoka polishing, and saw how itinerant metal workers, communal tool libraries, and resourceful apprentices wove a resilient workshop system by the Nile's edge. Now, in this final chapter of Story 4, we witness the culminating artistry of those tools in the hands of master sculptors, the ceremonial rites that consecrated each implement and finished sphinx, and the long-lasting impact of these tool traditions on Nubian cultural identity and craft heritage. The art of final polishing and detail enhancement. The red ochre and oil ritual last touch polishing sessions after chiseling and medium smoothing. Master finishers applied a final red ochre paste finely sieved and mixed with a blend of castor oil and beeswax. Using palm fiber pads, they worked the paste into every carved recess, then gently buffed with soft linen cloths. This ritual not only sealed microfishes but produced a muted, blood-warm glow that made Sphinx lines sing in torchlight. Sphinx blessing libation once polished layers dried. Priests poured libations of Nile water infused with lotus petals over each statue. Craftsmen watched as residual ochre dissolved into rivulets, a symbolic merge of earth, tool, water, and divine presence. This act sanctified both the completed sculpture and the tools that shaped it, reinforcing the belief that implements bore the imprint of sacred forces. B. Tool consecration and retirement. Annual tool blessing ceremony. Each New Year flood, artisans laid their chisels and picks before the temple's inner shrine. Priests incanted dedicatory hymns, invoking Ptah and Khnum to grant continued strength to metal edges. After blessing, tools earned a small dapple of consecrated red ochre on their butts, a mark of divine favor and communal respect. Ritual tool retirement. When a tool's edge became irreparable, its owner conducted a quiet retirement rite, plunging it once into the Nile at dawn, then laying it in a communal metal cemetery, a stone-paved courtyard corner. This farewell honored the tool's service and ensured its metal return to elemental cycles, ready for eventual recycling. II tools as cultural emblems and social anchors. A. Symbolism in art and literature. Chisel motifs in pottery and textiles. Tools appeared in minor decorative registers on Nubian pottery. Chisels framing deity figures. Flint picks incised around bowl rims. Textiles bore stylized tool motifs and weft patterns, signaling clan affiliations for master sculptors and smiths. These artistic echoes attest to tools' exalted status. Beyond workshops. Myths of the first chisel. Oral tales recounted the mythic forging of the skybreaker chisel, said to have cleaved the first sphinx form from raw mountain stone. Storytellers endowed this tool with semi-divine power. Its shards could cut through deception, and its silhouette at dawn was a good omen for safe harvests and successful hunts. B. Apprenticeship lineages and oral histories. Named tool lineage. Jemmy chisels bore unique names. Velvet Strike, Moon's Edge, passed from master to apprentice. Family histories recounted how Velvet Strike carved Queen Tai's Sphinx and later guided 3 generations of carvers, weaving personal narratives into the metal's patina. Elder-led tool museums in later centuries. Temple-adjacent tool museums displayed heirloom chisels and drill bits, each accompanied by stories of their makers and notable sculptures they aided. These living archives, curated by elder guild members, preserved technical memory and reinforced communal continuity long after active carving ceased. 3. Long-term impacts on Nubian craft and beyond. A. Diffusion of tool traditions. Regional tool variants. Nubian tool designs traveled west into Saharan oases and south toward Meroë. Adapted chisels, shorter blades for softer sandstone, bronze mixtures suited to local ore spread carving techniques beyond riverine communities, leaving a network of stylistic kinship across vast distances. Influence on later metalworking. The precise bevel angles and alloy formulas, pioneered by Nubian smiths, resurfaced in medieval Sudanese ironwork traditions. Centuries later, blacksmiths in Dongla and Khartoum referenced ancient templates. Liftero bevel angle, notches carved into temple stones as blueprints for forging spearheads and sickles. B. Modern revival and craft resurgence. Heritage workshops and living traditions. Today, Sudanese cultural centers along the Nile host toolmaking residencies, teaching bronze casting and chisel forging using ancient recipes. Apprentices practice lost wax methods and redoka polishing under elder supervision, ensuring that the tactile wisdom of tool care endures in living hands. Academic and community collaboration. Stratcham and local artisans partner in experimental archaeology projects, recreating ancient forges and validating historical alloy recipes. These collaborations produce not only scholarly insights but also community-driven museum exhibits, where visitors can handle replica chisels and try basic carving strokes on soft stone. 4. Reflective resonance. As you recall the forge's glow, the fervent hammer strokes on red-hot bronze, and the sacred hush as priests anointed both sphinx and tool. Reflect on this. How do the tools we craft and consecrate today, whether in art studios, industrial workshops, or digital labs, shape not only our capacities but also our cultural stories? And in what ways might we honor and preserve these instruments as living links to our collective ingenuity and heritage? Sustenance of stoneworkers' rations, rituals, and the temple supply chain. Before dawn's first light touched the sandy terraces of Jebel Barkal, the temple granary gates opened to a steady trickle of figures bearing baskets, jars, and jars of steaming pooge. These early arrivals were not priests or visiting dignitaries, but the very craftsmen whose chisels and forges would shape the great Nubian sphinxes. Their nourishment depended on a finely tuned temple supply system, one that measured every seah of barley, every jug of beer, and every loaf of bread to ensure laborers remained strong, focused, and ritually bound to the gods whose images they carved. The temple granary and ration calculations. Are capture and storage. The temple granary rose as a low, thick-walled mud brick structure, its interior divided into neat compartments for barley, imma, wheat, and dried legumes. Ventilation slits high on the walls admitted cooling breezes, while raised shelves kept sackcloth sacks off the stone floor, protecting grains from damp and pests. Ration schedules twice a month. The grain overseer, a lean official named Nakti, with the guild cadex to review projected labor needs. Based on block quotas and crew sizes, he allocated rations. Masters 40 Cs of barley, 6 jugs of beer, 1 loaf of date bread. Daily journeyman 25 Cs, 4 jugs, 1 loaf. Novaces 10 Cs, 2 jugs, half a loaf. Every quantity was recorded on an ostracon ledger and sealed with the overseer's emblem. Missing signatures rendered rations void, a strict measure that kept supply lines honest and transparent. Daily distribution each morning. Novices lined up at the granary gate with empty clay jars and woven baskets. Temple clerks measured out porridge, rations 3 handfuls of barley grain per worker, while brewers ladled out foaming beer into wooden bowls. The ritual use of beer extended beyond nutrition. Its sweetness enlivened spirits, and its mild intoxication eased the back-breaking strain of hauling and chiseling. Temple kitchens and the art of communal cooking. Kitchen layout adjoining the granary stood the temple kitchen's open-air courtyards paved with packed mud, ringed by low hearths of clay and stone. Over each hearth, iron cauldrons hung from carved wooden tripod stands, their curved legs sunk into sandy ash beds. Preparation of porridge and stew sat first light. Women, often the wives and daughters of journeymen, arrived to stoke fires and prepare the day's porridge. They boiled porridge in large cauldrons, hulled barley simmered with salt and water until tender, then ladled into individual bowls. Midday meals supplemented porridge with lentil and vegetable stews. Dried fava beans, rehydrated overnight, combined with onions, garlic, and a handful of dates, produced a hearty broth that fueled afternoon carving sessions. Bread baking rituals. A separate bakery courtyard featured small conical clay ovens. Dough kneaded from finely sifted emmer wheat and spiced lightly with caraway seeds rested under linen cloths until the late morning shift. Bakers then slapped flattened rounds onto hot oven walls, retrieving them minutes later as soft, golden loaves. Each loaf bore the temple's seal-pressed icon of the Sphinx, confirming its sacred provenance. Beyond grain and beer, supplementary offerings, protein sources 3 times a week. The temple distributed dried fish from the Nile catch and salted pigeon meats raised in rooftop dovecotes. Fishermen delivered sun-dried mullet and tilapia in reed baskets. Shepherds contributed salted mutton strips. These were boiled and shredded into stews or grilled over open flames, providing essential protein for muscle repair. Fruit, vegetables, and seasonal foods. Pilgrim donations supplemented rations during harvest festivals. Local farmers brought figs, pomegranates, and cucumbers. Temple gardeners, maintaining small plots irrigated from nearby canals, harvested fresh lettuce and leeks for special all-guild feasts, reinforcing social bonds across carving and cooking crews. Ritual offerings of oil and incense each evening. As chisels paused and forges cooled, priests offered seal oil lamps and incense before the Sphinx statues. Craftsmen ritually shared in these offerings. A small cup of perfumed wine and a morsel of honeycake sustained them during late-night carving sessions, marking moments when artistry met devotion. Supply chain coordination and seasonal logistics. Transport and flood-tide planning. Grain stores, replenished from southern provinces, arrived by barge during the high flood season. Temple quartermasters scheduled shipments to coincide with rising waters, ensuring heavy sacks floated upstream to granary docks. As floods receded, supply routes switched to land-based camel caravans, delivering top-ups of beer barrels and dried meats, buffer stocks and emergency reserves. Recognizing the unpredictability of Nile levels, temple authorities maintained a 3-month reserve of staples. Hidden storage vaults sealed behind false walls ensured that during unseasonal low floods or political disruptions, craftsmen never faced ration shortages. Record-keeping and oversight. Quarterly audits by visiting tax officials reviewed granary ledgers, compared physical stock against oat or barley receipts, and cross-checked ration distribution. These audits curbed embezzlement and strengthened the integrity of the craftsmen's sustenance network. Unresolved question: as you imagine steaming bowls of porridge and ringing wooden bowls of beer sustaining hundreds of carvers, reflect on this. How did the meticulous orchestration of food, drink, and ritual offerings underpin the physical endurance and spiritual devotion of Nubian Sphinx sculptors, and what lessons might modern organizations draw from this ancient model of nourishing both body and community in large-scale endeavors? You witnessed the temple's elaborate supply system, granaries, kitchens, and rations calibrated to sustain masters, journeymen, and novices as they carved Nubian sphinxes. Now we delve into how these material provisions intertwined with ritual practice, reinforced social bonds, and underpinned the political economy of You'll explore the ceremonial calendars governing special feasts, the reward mechanisms that recognized exceptional labor, and the hidden tensions that occasional shortages exposed, revealing how food and drink shaped not only bodies but also loyalties and hierarchies in the Nile's great sculpting enterprise. ceremonial calendars and communal feasting. Monthly chisels, feast timing and purpose. On the first day of each lunar month, the temple hosted the Chisels Feast, a communal banquet celebrating the previous month's carving achievements. Workers from all guild levels gathered in the temple courtyard beneath hanging lanterns sculpted in mini sphinx shapes. Menu and symbolism tables groaned under platters of barley porridge enriched with date honey and cheese, curds braised pigeon, and mullet stews, symbolizing the union of land and Nile pomegranate and lentil salads. Their red seeds echoing red ochre polishing paste. Each dish carried symbolic weight. Barley honored resilience, fish represented adaptability, and pomegranates evoked fertility of both land and labor. Ritual elements before the feast. A senior priest recited blessings. May the grain multiply as our block quotas grow. May the ale's foam rise as our chisels sparks fly. Participants sipped thin barley wine from shared goblets, binding them in a moment of communal reciprocity. B. Quarterly. Masters Banquet honoring guild achievements every 3 months. The Masters Banquet elevated top-performing masters and journeymen. Invitations inscribed on papyrus bore the pharaoh seal, marking royal recognition of their contributions to Sphinx projects. Ceremonial protoclanories received cloth robes dyed in deeper crimson distinct from standard linen silver goblets, engraved with the Sphinx emblem, filled with spiced wine gold wire wreaths woven into their hair, signifying elite status. Political overtones. The banquet doubled as a political stage. Governors and temple officials exchanged favors with guild leaders, negotiating grain taxes and carving commissions. Masters navigated these networks, leveraging feast invitations to secure better rations or future project assignments. Rewards, penalties, and the moral exceptional performance incentives. Golden Chisel Awards. Masters who introduced tool innovations such as improved alloy mixes or new grindstone techniques received a Golden Chisel token, awarded publicly during the Masters Banquet. This bronze replica of a chisel, plated with electrum, granted its bearer priority access to temple-sponsored expeditions and first choice of apprentices. Apprentice merit scrolls. Journeymen and novices exceeding quotas or demonstrating exceptional skill earned merit scrolls. Small astraca inscribed with praise from the Kadik. Scroll bearers enjoyed temporary rations bonuses and could petition for accelerated promotions. B. Managing shortages and disputes. Ration shortfall protocols in years of poor harvests or transport disruptions. Grain rations tightened. The Emergency Grain Council, composed of temple stewards and guild cadics, met to reallocate reserves. Decisions guided by a struck of ballots often favored critical toolsmiths and master carvers, preserving carving continuity at the expense of lower-ranked laborers. Appeal mechanisms. Disgruntled workers could lodge petitions written on a and placed in the offering box requesting redress. Petitions citing medical needs or family hardship received priority during council reviews, demonstrating a rudimentary form of social welfare within the carving community. 3. Interplay of devotion, labor, and social cohesion. Shared spiritual identity. Collective offerings beyond individual rations. Craftsmen participated in collective offerings, communal burning of incense and sealing of oil lamp votives dedicated to Ptah, Kunam, and local deities. Sharing in these rites reinforced group identity, framing daily labor as sacred service. Occupational patron saints. Each guild worshipped a patron saint of an ancient master carver deified in local legend. Guild chapels displayed statuettes of these figures, and craftsmen left small chisels or pigment pots as votive gifts, linking professional pride to spiritual belonging. B. Tensions and reconciliations. Rank resentments despite shared rituals. Rank disparities sometimes bred resentment. Novices chafed at meager rations. Journeymen bristled at masters' privileges. Occasional work stoppages and the threat of God's displeasure drove periodic reconciliations, articulated in peace oaths recited before temple altars, binding parties to mutual cooperation for the coming month. Festival truce days. During major festivals such as the flood festival marking inundation, normal work ceased entirely. All laborers, regardless of rank, joined in communal dances and river processions, renewing social bonds and temporarily suspending hierarchies under a shared sense of renewal. Unresolved reflection. As you contemplate temple kitchens turning grain into porridge, the solemn chisels feast under lantern-lit sphinxes, and the moral economies that balanced reward with restraint. Consider how might modern workplaces draw from these ancient models where daily sustenance, ritual obligation, and collective recognition intertwine to foster communities that nourish both practical needs and shared purpose. You trace the meticulous supply systems and ritual economies that fueled Nubian sculptors' granaries calibrated by the flood's pulse. Temple kitchens steaming with porridge and stews. Communal feasts binding masters and novices alike, and the intricate balances of reward, debt, and devotion that underpinned every ration and roast. Now, we conclude Story 5 by examining how these offerings shaped not only the physical endurance of stone workers, but also the lasting social structures, religious sentiments, and collective identities woven into the Nile's bedrock. By the end, you'll see how the simple acts of breaking bread, sharing beer, and presenting oil lamp votives left legacies as enduring as the Sphinxes themselves, and how their wisdom might illuminate our own modern practices of care, community, and commemoration, institutionalizing care from guild welfare to statecraft day, evolving welfare mechanisms from ad hoc to formalized support originally. Food distributions and beer allocations followed seasonal needs and ad hoc adjustments by temple stewards and guild catecs. Over decades, these evolved into formal welfare ordinances inscribed on temple walls, minimum grain rations guaranteed year-round. Even in famine years, medical allowances of additional protein rations for injured or aging workers' family shares, extending partial rations to widows and orphans of deceased carvers by codifying support. The state institutionalized care for its artisans, recognizing that the physical well-being of sculptors was integral to the empire's religious and political grandeur. Temple-sponsored apprenticeships, scholarships, grand benefactors, royal patrons, and wealthy merchants established endowments that funded apprenticeship scholarships, covering the grain, beer, and tool rations for promising youths from distant villages. These scholarships expanded access beyond established lineages, diversifying the guild's talent pools and injecting new regional perspectives into carving traditions. Integration into broader administrative systems, fiscal registers, and tax exemptions. Temple grain distributions formed part of larger fiscal registers maintained by regional administrators. In recognition of their service, qualifying sculptors received partial tax exemptions on personal plots, reflecting a nascent social contract. Serve the state's sacred projects, and the state sustains your household. Health provisions in civil codes inspired by temple welfare ordinances. Local councils began incorporating artisan health provisions into civil codes, mandating basic medical care for all workers in state-sponsored projects and ensuring fair compensation for on-the-job injuries. A precursor to modern occupational health legislation. Ritual offerings as vectors of social Meroë, commemorative practices, feast day anniversaries long after a sphinx's completion. The date of its dedication, when oil libations mingled with priestly incense, became an annual feast day, observed by descendants of the original carvers. Families traced their lineages to those who first distributed porridge or brewed festival beer, weaving collective memory into the temple's liturgical calendar. Memorial astraca and votive deposits. Memorial astraca, small shards painted with names and dates, were deposited in temple cellars alongside unused oil lamps. During restoration campaigns in later dynasties, these fragments resurfaced, revealing personal dedications. Nectamot, son of Ramos, honors his father's feast day, offering oil for another year. Such deposits preserved familial and occupational histories that formal chronicles might overlook. The Sphinxes as living testaments, eternal witnesses to communal sustenance. The Sphinxes themselves, chiseled from Jebel Barkal granite and polished in Rodoka glow, stood as silent monuments to the breakfasts and beers that shaped their making. Pilgrim graffiti scratched initials and brief prayers adorned their bases, testifying to generations of laborers and worshippers whose daily meals linked body to stone, earth to eternity. Adaptation of offerings in changing religions as religious tides shifted. Amana reforms, Ptolemaic syncretism, Christianization. Temple offerings evolved. Beer gave way to wine, porridge to bread and fish meals. Yet the fundamental pattern persisted. Communal sustenance rituals anchored sacred labor and shared nourishment, transcending doctrinal transformations. 3 lessons for modern India: body, spirit, and community. Holistic support. Systems integration of physical and social care. The Nubian model wove together nutrition, health, ritual, and social recognition into a cohesive system that sustained monumental labor. Modern organizations might similarly integrate nutritional support, occupational health, and ritualized team building, recognizing that worker well-being extends beyond wages to encompass communal identity and shared purpose. Adaptive welfare models. Just as temple councils adjusted rations in famine years and endowed scholarships broadened access, contemporary institutions can develop flexible welfare policies, scaling benefits according to economic conditions, and creating targeted support for emerging talents to foster inclusivity and resilience. Be ritualized recognition and collective memory. Periodic celebration of milestones. The Nubian chisels, feast and masters banquet exemplify how periodic celebrations reinforce communal bonds and recognize individual contributions. Modern projects, corporate, academic, or civic, could adopt analogous milestone ceremonies. For example, project kickoffs, halfway birthdays, completion galas to honor collective effort and nurture a sense of shared legacy. Archival of shared histories. Astraka preserved personal narratives and welfare decisions. Today's organizations might similarly maintain accessible records of employee achievements, health initiatives, and charitable programs, creating living archives that ground institutional memory in human experiences rather than abstract metrics. Final reflection. As you reflect on steaming bowls of porridge, fueling dawn's first chisels, the rhythmic sharing of beer binding masters and novices, and the solemn libations that consecrated both stone and sustenance, consider this question. our own modern labors, whether in factories, offices, or digital spaces. How might we design systems of nourishment, care, and ritual that honor both individual needs and collective aspirations, ensuring that the work of our hands and minds remains grounded in shared humanity, as did the craftsmen of Nubian sphinxes? Lifelines of timber and tides transporting sphinx blocks with woodcraft and boats. You've seen how craftsmen were sustained by temple offerings and how chisels were forged and consecrated. Now turn to the monumental challenge of moving two granite blocks along the Nile's shores, an endeavor that fused boatwright skill, carpentry know-how, and intimate knowledge of river currents. In this section, you'll board the feluccas and inspect riverside soppits. Watch as shipwrights cut sycamore and tamarisk into beams, as carpenters fashion sledges and rollers, and as boat crews read flood tides to synchronize raft launches. By journey's end, you'll appreciate how timber and tides together powered the transportation network that carried stone from quarry to temple. Riverside timber resources and so pizza, harvesting sycamore and tamarisk, selecting tree species workshop. Foreman chose sycamore ficus, sycamorus for its straight, not free trunks, ideal for beams, and tamarisk nilotica for slender poles and lashings. Seasonal riverbank surveys guided timber teams to stands of mature trees, ensuring sustainable cuts. Traditional soppit operations of fits narrow trenches, 2 meters deep lined with stone slabs, hosted a 2-person cross-saw, 1 worker atop the log, another below in the pit. Their synchronized pulls, guided by rhythmic chants, transformed felled trunks into beams up to 6 meters long. Sawdust swept aside, workers seasoned beams on raised racks, preventing warping before carpentry. Woodcraft workshops, carpentry stations adjacent to sawpits, carpentry benches held mallets, ADSs, and augers. Carpenters crafted sledge, runners curved tamarisk strips shaped to cradle granite, blocks roller shafts, sycamore poles turned smooth to reduce friction, hearth cradles, wooden frames for floating rafts, jointing and lashing techniques, beams joined with mortar sand tenon joints, reinforced with wooden pegs, lashings of woven palm frond cordage-bound sledges to rollers and beams to raft platforms. Carpentry apprentices learn to tighten lashings with wedge tools, a critical skill for securing loads against Nile swells. 2. Crafting the Nile vessels. A felucca, construction hull design and materials. Felucca hulls, fashioned from cedar planks, imported via Red Sea trade, exemplified lightweight yet sturdy craft. Planks fastened with copper nails. HULL seams sealed with palm fiber, caulking soaked in resin. Mast, sail, and steering arrangements. Single lateen masts carried triangular cotton sails, trimmed to catch seasonal breezes. Steering oars, tamarisk shafts allowed precise navigation in shifting channels, while shallow drafts enabled passage over sandbars. Raft assemblies, log raft platforms during flood season. Crews lashed bundles of tamarisk and papyrus reed floats under timber platforms. These rafts, measuring up to 4-6 meters, supported 2 to 3 granite blocks, buoyed by the swollen Nile. Securing stone loads, blocks slid onto rafts via wooden ramps. Lashings and wooden chocks held them firm. Clay-soaked cloth strips padded block bases to prevent shifting. Launch ceremonies invoked Cam's blessing, ensuring safe passage. 3. Navigating the Nile's rhythms. Flood tide scheduling, high water advantages. Peak inundation created natural ramps and buoyancy, enabling raft approaches beneath cliff quarry faces. Schedules aligned block launches with rising tides, minimizing manual hauling. Low water adaptation. Waters receded. Heavier reliance fell on sledges and roller systems. Boat crews guided mutinous feluccas to deeper channels, while shore parties used lever poles to nudge rafts over shallow banks. Pilot expertise in river hazards, charting currents, and sandbanks. Veteran pilots memorized shifting sandbars and eddy patterns, reading watercolor and surface ripples. Their guidance prevented raft groundings and felucca capsizes laden with precious tools and blocks. Storm and night navigations, sudden squalls on the Nile, whipping winds and spray-tested lashing integrity. Crews carried emergency patch kits, palm frond mats and resin paste to seal hull breaches, ensuring survival through storms. Unresolved otters. You envisage beams sliding from soapits to sledges and feluccas cutting across shimmering floodwaters. Ask yourself, what critical but often unseen systems of timber harvest, carpentry, and pilot wisdom enable our modern supply chains, and how might celebrating such networks deepen our appreciation for the material roots of grand achievements? You traced timber harvesting, carpentry workshops, and river vessels that ferried granite from quarry to temple. Now, we follow the stone's journey once floodwaters recede overland on greased rollers, sledges, and lever teams along packed Nile floodplains. We'll examine the engineering of sledges and roller tracks, the organization of hauling crews, and the communal rituals that sustain their labor across dusty plains and embankments. Sledge and roller system design. Sledge construction and runner geometry. Runner profiles. Sledge runners, crafted from seasoned tamarisk, featured gently curved fronts to glide over sand, Their bottom surfaces were beveled at a shallow 5 angle, distributing load evenly and minimizing resistance. Runner attachment and frame runners attached to heavy oak crossbeams via mortise and tenon joints. Beams themselves formed the sledge's mainframe, reinforced by hardwood brackets. Top surfaces were fitted with leather pads to stabilize blocks and reduce direct timber to stone contact. B. Roller track engineering, roller selection and maintenance. Sycamore poles about 30 centimeters in diameter were selected for uniform thickness. Crews seasoned them on racks to prevent cracking. Daily maintenance, oiling with animal fat kept rollers supple and minimized friction. Track layout and greasing protocols. Parallel roller tracks spanned routes from riverbank to ramp bases. Tracks were laid on compacted sand and stone dust, greased with a blend of date palm oil and fine sand to weigh down lubricant and prevent slippage. Teams replaced greased tracks every 200 meters to ensure consistent glide. To labor, organization and haulage techniques. Haul crews and leadership team composition. Hauling crews comprised 30 to 40 laborers overseen by a haul master Yapmfet, identifiable by a dyed underline sash. Below him, track foreman Kerrybet managed 8 to 10 men each, coordinating roller placement and signaling shifts. Chant rhythms and coordination. Crews moved in time to low, rhythmic chants, haha, synchronized to foot strikes. Foreman used horn calls blown through hollow reed tubes to signal start, shift changes, and rest breaks, ensuring unified effort. B. Mechanical advantage in animal draft block leverage systems for heavy inclines. Crews set up simple block and tackle rigs, wooden A-frames anchored in the ground, bronze pulleys and hemp ropes. This mechanical advantage reduced human strain, letting smaller teams hoist blocks over minor embankments. Oxen and donkey. Recruits were scarce or distances long. Communities loaned oxen and donkeys. Animals hitched to leather collars and wooden yokes pulled sledges in tandem with human teams, augmenting hauling capacity and preserving human energy for final positioning. 3. Communal sustenance and ritual aida. En route provision. Hutus every 500 meters. Teams erected thatched way stations offering shade, water basins, and barley-paste snacks. Novices rotated shifts between hauling and way station duties, refilling water skins, distributing porridge bowls, and ensuring pace continuity. First aid posts. Simple clinics at way stations treated blisters, strains, and dehydration. Herbal packs, mint and cumin eased muscle aches, while goatskin flasks provided cool hydration. B. Rituals for safe passage. Libations at waypoint shrines. Small stone shrines carved with sphinx reliefs marked each kilometer. Crews paused to pour a ladle of water or oil at these shrines, invoking Kem's favor for the remaining trek. Boundary crossing ceremonies upon entering temple precincts. Hauling crews paused at the Great Gate, performing a brief torchlit circle, and reciting unified chant symbolically, transitioning from terrestrial toil to sacred service. Asterisks. Unresolved thought as you envision sledges gliding on greased rollers, oxen straining at yokes, and workers pausing at thatched way stations for porridge and prayer. Consider, how do modern supply routes, whether highways, railways, or data networks, mirror ancient hauling systems in their reliance on staged rest, mechanical leverage, and collective coordination, and what might we learn by studying their human-scale rituals and supports? You accompanied Felucas and sledges ferrying granite blocks from Jebel Barkal's quarries along the Nile's winding shores, witnessed soppets fashioning beams into sledges and rollers, and felt the coordinated chants of hauling crews sustaining their muscle with porridge, water, and ritual libations. Now, in this concluding section of Story 6, we follow the stone's last leg, their precision positioning on temple foundations, the ceremonies marking their settling into place, and the ripple effects of these logistical feats on Nubian society, perhaps, by extension, on our understanding of modern supply chains. Precision placement at the temple foundation. Final leveling technique. Stone bedding preparation. Carpenters leveled the bedrock plinth with sand and clay mixtures, using water-filled troughs to confirm horizontality. Even a few centimeters of unevenness risked Sphinx tilting over centuries. Leveraged jacks and incremental adjustments. Inserted wooden screw jacks made from tamarisk threaded rods and carved nut housings beneath sledges. Turning these with bronze wrenches raised blocks by millimeter increments, allowing insertions of polished ivory shims until perfect alignment was a CHIEVEDB block. Unloading and sledge removal. Decoupling from transport frames with the block fully on its final bed. Lashings were cut and sledge runners carefully slid out, leaving the stone undisturbed. Metal wedges protected ornate carved edges from chipping during this delicate separation. Post placement. Inspections. Master surveyors employed plumb lines and sighting rods to verify that each sphinx faced true east aligning with solar cycles and that shoulder heights matched architectural plans. Any discrepancies triggered minor repolishing sessions before the day's end. 2. Ceremonial unveiling and community engagement. Ritual dedication of installed blocks. Lamp and incense offerings. Priests lit rows of oil lamps at the Sphinx's base, while carvers and haulers formed a procession, each carrying a small chalice of perfumed oils. Together, They circled the newly placed block 3 times, re-honoring its journey from mountain heart to sacred precinct. Communal feast and public praise. The completion of each block's placement merited a modest feast for hauling crews and toolsmiths. Foods mirrored earlier rations: bread, beer, a fish, symbolizing the full circle from nourishment to monumental labor. B. Integration into temple iconography. Sequential carving continuation. Once set, blocks joined an ongoing carving sequence adjacent. Sphinx formed processional avenues, their aligned bases framing the main sanctuary. The labor of dozens coalesced into a unified sculptural program that guided worshippers and pilgrims alike. Shared legacy in stone laborers, and artisans left subtle graffiti initials or clan emblems on hidden block undersides, a testament to their participation in a project transcending individual lifetimes, rediscovered by modern archaeologists. These marks revealed the human stories etched into imperial stone. 3. Long-term impacts in modern peril. As a societal transformation along the Nile, growth and settlement patterns. The need for timber, camps, hauling way stations, and tool-forged docks spurred permanent settlements along transport routes. Small villages once seasonal grew into year-round towns, supplying the temple complex, diversifying Nubian economic life beyond agriculture and herding. Specialized professions and guild expansion. The complexity of timber harvest, boat building, and overland logistics gave rise to new artisan guilds: shipwrights, timber framers, and river pilots, expanding the social fabric and skill base of Nubian society. B. Lessons for contemporary logistics. Integrated multimodal transportation. Nubian logisticians seamlessly combined river, overland, and mechanical systems: rafts, sledges, screw jacks, anticipating today's intermodal freight networks that link ships, trucks, and cranes for efficient cargo movement. Resilience through ritual and community. The choreographed rite at way stations, feasts upon completion fostered morale and a shared sense of purpose, reminding us that modern supply chains benefit not only from technological precision but from investing in human well-being and collective recognition. Reflective question. As you envision the final lever turns that set massive stones into place, the lamplit unveilings celebrating communal labor, and the settlements that sprang up to support this grand enterprise, ponder: how might we, in our era of globalized logistics, balance technological efficiency with human-scale rituals of recognition and community care, ensuring that every link in the transport chain remains both resilient and rooted in shared purpose? Decoding the silent language. Origins and evolution of Sphinx iconography in the vast sweep of Nubian temple precincts. The silent Sphinx stand guard, their inscrutable visages offering more than mere stone majesty. Each carved line, each subtle inlay, conceals a layered iconographic language, a system of hidden signatures that spoke to initiates and commoners alike. In this first section, you'll unravel how sculptors encoded political messages, spiritual concepts, and local identities into Sphinx iconography. From the earliest geometric conventions to evolving dynastic emblems, we'll trace the birth of these visual codes, examine their transmission through guild lineages, and ponder the unspoken dialogues they maintain between ruler, artisan, and worshipper. A genesis of the Sphinx motif. From Egyptian models to Nubian adaptations, Egyptian prototypes and their core symbols. The royal protector in Old Kingdom Egypt, Sphinx lion bodies with human heads symbolized monarchs, divine authority, and protective power. The earliest known, the Great Sphinx of Giza, bore the visage of Pharaoh Kafir, merging leonine strength with royal countenance. Its iconography drew on solar associations: lions as sun symbols and regal headgear, nemes headdress denoting pharaonic sovereignty, canonical proportions, and matte painting. Egyptian artisans established strict proportion formulas: body, length to head height ratios, portibulge dimensions that guided all Sphinx representations. Surfaces were often coated in matte white lime wash, then painted nemes stripes in alternating blue and yellow, eyes in black coal outlines, and the solar uraeus cobra in vivid red. These conventions ensured each Sphinx read unmistakably as a living embodiment of kingly power. B. Nubian readaptations and local visual vocabularies. Headgear variations. Upon adopting the Sphinx form, Nubian artisans introduced regional headgear variants: feathered crowns, symbolizing reverence for Amen and reflecting local featherwork traditions; double-feathered Atef crowns, denoting fusion of Egyptian solar cult with Nubian fertility rites; facial features and ethnic identities, subtle adjustments to facial anatomy: slightly broader noses, fuller lips, and higher cheekbones code Nubian physiognomy. These nuances, often imperceptible to casual observers, signaled a dual claim: alignment with Egyptian royal iconography, yet assertion of Nubian identity within the imperial framework. Body motifs and desert symbolism. Carvers incised dune patterns along Sphinx flanks, parallel, undulating lines evoking desert sands. Pole bases sometimes featured stylized acacia leaf scrolls, referencing local flora. These additions fused the Sphinx to its Nubian landscape, transforming imported form into regionally resonant guardian. 2. Secret signatures of power. dynastic, and guild markers, dynastic emblems and subtle variations, cartouche placement and color codes. Pharaoh's cartouches inscribed on sphinx backs conveyed overt ownership. However, master carvers often embedded micro-cartouche tiny royal names, hidden within main ridges or beneath pore curves visible only upon close inspection. These secret signatures ensured that even if overt inscriptions eroded, astute viewers could recognize the patron's identity. Color differentiation in uraeus royal cobra on the sphinx forehead bore color-coded hieroglyphs. Red-handled uraei denoted pharaohs of the Ramesside line. Green-handled uraei marked regencies or transitional rulers. The subtle hue shifts achieved with rare green copper-based pigments required precise pigment mixing and signaled both political nuance and artistic sophistication. B. Guild emblems and workshop signatures, lineage bands and tool marks. Each carving guild maintained unique lineage bands, decorative horizontal incisions along sphinx shoulders. These bands combine geometric shapes, zigzags, chevrons with minute hammerstroke patterns distinctive to each guild. Guild foremen signed their work through these bands, a hidden proof of quality and provenance akin to a modern maker's mark, unsigned. Relief inserts in recessed temple niches. Carvers sometimes placed small, freestanding reliefs, miniature sphinxes or tools beneath the main statue's base, crafted by specialized journeymen and left uncredited in official texts. These inserts served as guild-level signatures, honoring the collective contribution of under-recognized workers. *3 Evolving iconography through political shifts. Reforms and their aftermath. Iconoclasm and relief erasures during Pharaoh Akhenaten's Amana period. Many sphinxes suffered iconoclastic erasures, cartouches chiseled away, uraei smashed, and royal insignia defaced. Nubian carvers, however, sometimes replaced erased zones with abstract geometric motifs, interlocking circles or stylized lotus clusters, preserving artistry under the cover of spiritual neutrality. Restoration and hybridity after the Amana interlude. The restoration of traditional cults prompted reconsecration of defaced sphinxes. Carvers patched damaged areas with hybrid iconography combining pre-Amana and post-Amana elements, splashed new pigment outlines alongside older chiseling lines, a visual palimpsest reflecting religious recalibration. B. Ptolemaic and Roman influences. Hellenistic stylizations under Ptolemaic rule. Mediterranean stylistic currents introduced realistic drapery effects on sphinx headdresses and more expressive facial musculature. Guilds responded by carving subtle wave patterns in the mane that mimicked Hellenistic coiffures, embedding cross-cultural signatures in indigenous frameworks. Roman imperial portraiture. Roman emperors commissioned local sphinxes, bearing their own portrait features. Aquiline noses defined jewel. Carvers inscribed dual cartouches, one Egyptian, one Latin within the same main grooves, a bilingual testimony to layered sovereignty. Unresolved question as you contemplate dune wave patterns along leonine flanks, concealed micro-cartouches woven into coal-black curls, and the artful erasures that speak of ideological upheaval. Ask yourself, how do the hidden signatures carved into public monuments, political, professional, and personal shape our understanding of history, and in what ways might unveiling these silent languages enrich our appreciation for the complex dialogues etched into stone? You unraveled the origins of Sphinx iconography, how Egyptian prototypes merged with Nubian adaptations, how dynastic emblems and guild signatures hid in main ridges and shoulder bands, and how political shifts left their marks in defacements and restorations. Now, we delve further into the rich tapestry of symbolic meaning encoded in these stone sentinels. You'll explore how religious concepts, cosmological maps, and community memories found expression in subtle iconographic choices, and how these hidden layers guided worshippers, conveyed local pride, and preserved collective stories across generations. A cosmological and religious solar cycles and celestial alignment. Sun disk motifs of many sphinxes' heads. Carvers incised shallow reliefs of the sun disk, sometimes flanked by outstretched wings, though often painted over in faded cinnabar. These discs aligned the sphinx with Ra's daily journey, its shadow at sunrise cast eastward, at sunset westward, reinforcing the monument's role as a solar guardian. Stellar band inlays in select temple precincts, particularly those aligned with solstice axes. Artisans inlaid small pieces of obsidian and white calcite into bossed nodules on sphinx backs, mapping Ursa Major and Orion constellations. These stellar bands covered sections of the main invisible from ground level up. Secret prayer that the sphinx would mirror and protect the night sky as faithfully as it watched over the earth. The underworld references and protective magic. Netherworld eyes have identified small pairs of recessed netherworld eyes carved on sphinx chests beneath the main visage. Two shallow ovoid carvings reminiscent of the Eye of Horus according to temple manuscripts. These eyes see beneath the world of men, safeguarding the temple's undercrofts and ensuring the pharaoh's soul could journey safely through devote. The Egyptian netherworld protective amuletic inscriptions beneath sphinx. Pos typically concealed by sand briefing, phrases were chiseled in microhieroglyphs. Swallow not the heart, O guardian. These amuletic scripts, invisible to casual observers, functioned as magical seals, compelling malevolent forces to respect the Sphinx's boundary and warding off tomb robbers who might attempt to breach the temple's subterranean vaults. II. Local identity and communal memory, clan totems and lineage narratives animal companion figures and select Sphinx bases. Relief panels depict small companion animals, a Nile tortoise, a desert fox rendered with careful detail. These animals corresponded to founding clans of the guilds: the Tortoise clan, known for patience and rough modeling; the Fox clan, famed for clever solutions in toolmaking. Pilgrims recognized these emblems, offering clan-specific incenses at their feet. Narrative friezes of founding myths flanking some sphinxes. Low-relief friezes unfold foundational legends: the tale of Rohatep, who first tamed a river crocodile, to guide rafts, or of Anubis, who taught quarrymen to read stone joints. These narrative bands, subtle in depth and muted in ochre traces, preserved communal memories otherwise unwritten, linking each sculpture to a shared origin story. B. Seasonal iconography and agricultural cycles, flood markers and grainstalk grooves. The Sphinx's hindquarters, carvers incised shallow grooves in patterns mimicking emerging grainstalks. These seasonal markers commemorated the annual flood arrival, when carvers paused work to celebrate the Nile's nourishment while reminding temple attendants of ritual duties tied to sowing and harvest. Pollination motifs. Nubia designs often overlooked. Sheltered recesses along Sphinx benches. These pollination motifs signified fertility and regeneration, appealing to local beekeepers and farmers who contributed honey for offerings. By embedding these images in stone, the Sphinx maintained an unbroken link to the land's cyclical abundance. 3. Hidden layers in restoration and recarving. Palimpsest carving practices overlaying new iconography as restoration campaigns across centuries sometimes overlaid fresh symbols atop older reliefs: a Ptolemaic lotus motif carved over an Amana, a geometric panel, or a Christian cross faintly inscribed above an erstwhile netherworld eye. These palimpsest layers, discernible only through careful material analysis, chart the region's shifting spiritual landscapes. Selective preservation and erasure. Temple authorities occasionally removed politically contentious signatures, as those of unpopular pharaohs, while preserving guild lineage bands. This selective erasure demonstrates a conscious curatorial approach, preserving communal heritage, while realigning monuments with prevailing ideologies. B. Modern archaeological revelations. Infrared and laser scanning, contemporary imaging technologies, revealed subsurface carvings lost to the naked eye. Infrared scanning has illuminated pigment residues in micro-cartouches. Laser profilometry maps minute tool marks of specific apprentice cohorts, reconstructing operational sequences in the workshops. Community-led rediscovery. Local Nubian heritage groups have partnered with archaeologists to interpret hidden signatures of oral traditions about clan emblems and seasonal rituals. Their work underscores that these stone languages remain vibrant conduits of cultural identity, not mere academic curiosities. Unresolved question as you reflect on constellation inlays, clan totems carved beneath poor shadows, and the layered palette of political and religious change. Ponder this. In what ways do our own public monuments, memorials, and urban artworks carry hidden signatures of community values, local histories, or unrecorded labor that await rediscovery? And how might unveiling these silent layers deepen our collective understanding of place and identity? You peeled back the layers of Sphinx iconography, discovering hidden dynastic cartouches, guild lineage bands, cosmological inlays, and clan totems, each inscribed gesture, a node in a vast visual network. Now, in this final section of Story 7, we witness how these silent languages were consecrated in ritual, received by populations across Nubia, and resonated through centuries of political change and cultural memory. We conclude by reflecting on the Sphinx's lasting power as a communicator of identity, belonging, and authority. Ritual activation of iconographic codes, ceremonies of consecration. The inaugural eyes-opening rite. Upon completion of a Sphinx's final carving, priests performed the eyes-opening rite at dawn on the designated feast day. Incense smoke curled through the shrine as a senior officiant anointed the micro-cartouches hidden in the main with scented oil, reciting "Awaken, silent witness to see both sky and earth, to guard Pharaoh's path and clan's hearth." A chosen apprentice communed the guild's lineage totems, touching turtle and fox emblems, infusing them with symbolic life. This fusion of guild and divine activation bound each symbolic element into a living talisman. Threshold binding. Evening of the same day, temple heralds lead processions around the Sphinx row, carrying standards bearing clan emblems and dynastic banners. 4 times around each statue, they traced the cosmic cardinal directions: east for sunrise solar references, south for the flood's nourishment, west for the realm of the dead tied to netherworld eyes, and north for celestial guidance, sealing the array of iconographic motifs into a protective ritual. GRIDB. Public reception and pilgrim engagement. Pilgrim recognition of hidden signs. While common worshippers marveled at the Sphinx's overall grandeur, Educated pilgrims in training or temple acolytes knew to inspect specific recesses for clan totems and layered cartouches. These initiates would quietly leave small votive chips of ochre at hidden emblems, acknowledging the stone's whispered messages and their own belonging to a broader community of meaning. Processional scripts and liturgical guides. Temple libraries housed liturgical scrolls detailing processional routes and points of iconographic emphasis. During festivals, priests read from processional scripts instructing devotees 3 paces hence. Turn your gaze to the dorsal stellar band. Offer a prayer for the souls you track. These guided tours turn the temple precinct into an interactive narrative space, where moving bodies engaged in a dialogue with engraved symbols. Iconography across political transitions. Persistence through turbulent surviving conquests and cultural shifts over centuries. Nubia endured pharaonic reprioritizations, Ptolemaic incursions, and later Roman dominion. Yet the core iconographic language, the interplay of solar discs, microcartouches, and clan totems remained legible. Rather than erase these signs outright, successive regimes often repurposed them, overlaying new royal names beside existing guild bands, an acknowledgement that this multi-layered code transcended any single ruler. Local guardianship and restoration efforts. During periods of neglect, local villagers assumed custodial roles. Oral epics recount how 3rd century custodians, during a drought, reclaimed a half-buried sphinx and recarved faded netherworld eyes, restoring its protective magic. These grassroots restorations, rarely documented in formal records, testify to the iconography's power and communal resilience and place-based devotion. B. Scholarly rediscovery in the modern era. 3 Pliny's encyclopedic marvels and misclassifications. Natural histories and stone wonders. In his Natural History c. 77 CE, Pliny the Elder listed the great lion statues of Napata among the world's 7 marvels of masonry, marveling at their seamless formation from single monoliths. Material speculations. Pliny speculated the granite aged into hardness under the sun's gaze, attributing Sphinx longevity to climatic effects. This naturalistic, albeit inaccurate, explanation underscores Romans' efforts to rationalize foreign phenomena within their framework of elemental theory. Cataloging errors. He mislocated some Nubian sphinxes near Syene, modern Aswan, a mistake repeated by medieval copyists. Such errors muddled geographic knowledge but also preserved Pliny's descriptions across centuries, inspiring Renaissance travelers to seek these statues in unexpected locales. B. Sociopolitical interpretations. Pliny suggested that Sphinx heads resembled local chieftains more than Egyptian pharaohs, hinting at Nubian agency in carving and patronage. While debated by modern scholars, this assertion illustrates classical awareness of regional variations, albeit filtered through Roman sociopolitical lenses that posited local autonomy as deviation from imperial norms. IV. Cumulative impact on Mediterranean perceptions. Influence on classical and medieval thought. Replication in art and architecture. Classical garden sculptures and Roman villa mosaics echoed Nubian Sphinx forms, albeit in miniature. The proliferation of Sphinx motifs across the Mediterranean attests to the enduring fascination these statues inspired, shaping the visual vocabulary of protective guardians well into the medieval period. Literary legacy. Medieval European manuscripts drawing on Pliny and Strabo perpetuated stories of lion statues with human heads, inspiring allegorical interpretations that divorced sphinxes from their Nile origins. These tales transformed them into symbols of riddling guardians, preludes to the Greek myth of Oedipus's encounter. B. Modern rediscoveries and reassessments. Uraeus corrections. 19th century explorers, cross-referencing classical texts with local inscriptions and oral traditions, corrected misplacements and clarified patronage, affirming many sphinxes as Ptolemaic rather than Old Kingdom relics. These efforts resurrected genuine Nubian contributions from the sediment of classical misclassification. Contemporary scholarship. Today's historians synthesized traveler accounts with archaeological data, appreciating classical narratives' mix of insight and misconception, recognizing biases. Gastronomic analogies. Imperial taxonomy scholars reconstruct a more nuanced picture of Nubian Sphinx art and its Mediterranean reception. Unresolved reflection as you consider the layered echoes of Herodotus's taste-based metaphors, Strabo's cartographic zeal, and Pliny's encyclopedic marvels. Reflect on this. How do travelers' accounts shaped by their own cultural frameworks, biases, and limited knowledge both illuminate and obscure the societies they describe? And how might we read their words today to discern genuine insight amid misinterpretation? You heard the first tremors of foreign voices, the vivid, sometimes flawed impressions of Herodotus, Strabo, and Pliny as they grappled with the grandeur of Nubian sphinxes. Now we step into their lived encounters, the dusty caravan camps, the riverbank marketplaces, and the courts of Hellenistic and Roman elites where these travelers shared their impressions. You'll see how direct interaction with local artisans, participation in temple rituals, and trade negotiations shaped and reshaped their narratives. Along the way, we'll uncover how social hierarchies and political ambitions influenced what these chroniclers emphasized or omitted, and how their writings, in turn, affected later travelers and colonial attitudes toward Nubia. Marketplaces, guild halls, and social exchange. Encounters in Nile River ports. Alexandrian merchants and Nubian delegations at bustling ports like Elephantine. Greek and Nubian traders met under awnings of woven papyrus mats. Classical visitors observed Nubian delegations negotiating for Egyptian grain and Greek textiles, often noting the delegations' distinctive turbans and leopard skin cloaks, symbols of Nubian status. These clothing details occasionally conflated with Sphinx iconography, seeped into literary accounts, lending travelers descriptions, a costume drama quality. Guildhall audiences in Greco-Roman temple precincts. Foreign dignitaries were sometimes granted audiences in guild halls, large colonnaded chambers where master carvers presented miniature Sphinx models as diplomatic gifts. Witnessing these exchanges, travelers recorded the ritualized give-and-take speeches extolling the pharaoh's grandeur, Nubian responses invoking river spirits, and the presentation of carved reliefs depicting Greek deities alongside Egyptian motifs. Such scenes underscored a mutual appropriation of iconographic languages. Carver-patron relationships. Roman officials, as patrons, Ptolemaic and Roman governors sometimes commissioned new sphinxes or restorations as demonstrations of loyalty. Pliny recounts a Roman prefect, Cornelius Secundus, praising local carvers for adapting imperial portraits into sphinx sculptures. In return, Secundus rewarded them with citizen privileges recorded on papyrus, decrees illustrating how patronage shaped both the art form and its documentation in classical texts. Artisan commentaries. Arian of Nicomedia, in a less-known travelogue, interviews a master sculptor named Philos, who explained the symbolic logic of hidden signatures and clan totems. Arian's verbatim quotes, unique among classical sources, provide rare technical insight, revealing that direct artisan engagement tempered sweeping generalizations and enriched their written reports to religious syncretism and ritual participation. Foreigners in Nubian temples. Initiation ceremonies. Some Greek travelers, drawn by curiosity or religious impulse, underwent brief initiation rites in Nubian temples. They describe washing in sacred Nile pools, participating in torchlit processions, flanked by Sphinx rows, and donning linen tunics before approaching hidden gods. Strabon, usually candid, admits his own trepidation when entering the inner sanctum, where silent sphinxes loomed above chanting priests, interpretive challengers lacking knowledge of hieroglyphs or native languages. Many travelers misinterpreted ritual actions. Herodotus famously mistook symbolic animal sacrifices intended gateposts with sphinx reliefs for calls to war, while remembering the accompanying melodies as martial trumpet blasts, reflecting a bias toward martial rather than agricultural interpretations. Syncretic artifacts and hybrid iconography. Portable amulets. Merchants collected small amuletic sphinx pendants crafted in local silver as souvenirs. Some bore Latin inscriptions alongside Egyptian glyphs, testifying to a hybrid religious market. These objects circulated back to the Mediterranean, where they influenced jewelry styles and sparked renewed interest in Sphinx symbolism during the Roman imperial cult. Fusion in temple reliefs. In a few Ptolemaic temples, classical visitors noted sphinxes carved flanking reliefs of Dionysian processions, wind-drinking rituals incongruous with Egyptian austerity. These juxtapositions signaled official endorsement of cultural blending. Monks spoke of new festivals combining grape harvest rites with the Nile flood, though such accounts may exaggerate the depth of syncretism. Political agendas and historiographical impacts. Imperial narratives and colonial mindsets. Roman, the appropriation of Nubian art. Tacitus, cited in later medieval manuscripts, lauded Rome's conquest of Nubia by depicting captured sphinxes paraded through Alexandria, while modern scholarship doubts these spectacles occurred. The story reveals how classical authors repurposed Sphinx iconography to emphasize imperial dominance, influencing subsequent perceptions of Nubia as a subjugated territory. An early Islamic reinterpretation. Chroniclers, relying on Pliny and Strabo, reinterpreted sphinxes through Christian lenses as demons banished by saints, leading to localized iconoclastic attacks. Yet many sculptures survived, their layered classical descriptions serving as protective metadata that discouraged wholesale destruction. Legacy in modern scholarship. Orientalist framing. 19th century Egyptologists, steeped in classical texts, initially dismissed local inscriptions and guild traditions as secondary. They labeled Sphinx iconographic variants as barbarian deviations, reflecting lingering Greek and Roman biases. Only in the late 20th century did archaeologists revisit original texts alongside epigraphic evidence, correcting these misunderstandings. Holistic reappraisals. Scholars integrate traveler accounts with local oral histories and material analysis, treating classical narratives as one thread in a broader tapestry. This holistic approach honors both the foreign first impressions and the indigenous voices that animate Sphinx iconography from within. Unresolved questionnaires. You consider the interplay of traveler bias, patronage, politics, and ritual participation in shaping classical accounts. reflect how might acknowledging the agendas and limitations of our own sources, ancient or modernly, us to more nuanced understandings of cultural encounters and the artifacts they bequeath. You journeyed alongside Greek and Roman travelers, Herodotus's culinary metaphors, Strabo's geographic zeal, Pliny's encyclopedic lists, and witnessed how their interactions with temple rituals, guild masters, and local markets shaped layered accounts of Nubian sphinxes. Now, in this final section of Story 8, we explore how these classical narratives endured, how they influenced subsequent monuments and scholarship, and how they entered into a perpetual dialogue with Nubian self-representation through the lenses of pilgrimage, colonial appropriation, and modern heritage practices. We trace the afterlife of foreign eyes upon these silent sentinels, and consider how their stories continue to inform, inspire, and complicate our own encounters with the past. Pilgrimage, prose, and the persistence of Sphinx lore. Medieval and early modern pilgrimages. Christian pilgrim accounts from the 6th to the 12th century CE. Christian itineraries such as the Itinerarium, Berdigalens, and the Book of John. Mandeville briefly mentions stone lions with crowned heads along a great river, though often conflated with Egyptian sphinxes. These accounts kept classical echoes alive, prompting occasional pilgrim detours inland to seek Nubian marvels. Renaissance rediscoveries in the 15th and 16th centuries. European explorers guided by Pliny's mistaken coordinates ventured south of Aswan. Bernardino Drovetti's early 19th century sketches of Jebel Barkal sphinxes, published in Paris, reintroduced their forms to Western art circles, sparking neoclassical sculptures and garden follies that echoed these distant PROTOTYPESB 19th century colonial excavations. French and British surveys under Napoleon's expedition, 1798 to 1801, and later British-led surveys. Scholars documented Nubian sites, often carrying imprimerie Galicium editions of Strabo and Pliny to cross-reference ruins. They numbered sphinxes as archaeological artifacts. Monument No. 23 at Jebel Barkal, creating inventories that privileged foreign frameworks over local oral traditions. Artifacts in European collections. Sculpted fragments, heads, and paws were carded. 2 museums in London and Paris exhibited as trophies of colonial discovery. Labels echoed traveler quotes Herodotus's red pomegranate sheen, Pliny's monolithic marvel, framing them within classical narratives even as they severed ties to Nubian contexts. 2. Reclaiming narratives. Modern Nubian perspectives. A post-colonial heritage movements. Sudanese stewardship following Sudan's independence in 1956. Governmental and community initiatives reclaimed Jebel Barkal from archaeological back. Joint Sudanese-Italian restorations in the 1970s employed local labor, integrating Nubian elder knowledge, stories of clan totems, hidden cartouche into interpretive programs, countering centuries of foreign-centric storytelling. Oral history. Project Sanjos partnered with elder carvers and ritual specialists to record oral histories of temple ceremonies and guild lineages. These accounts, compiling living memory of hidden signatures and festival rites, offer crucial counterpoints to classical texts, revealing the lived continuity of Sphinx veneration. B. Academic rereadings and public engagement. Disciplinary scholarship. Modern researchers blend textual criticism of Greek and Roman sources with epigraphic surveys and ethnographic fieldwork. Studies in Nubia Journal and Journal of Egyptian Archaeology highlight discrepancies between traveler accounts and local inscriptions, proposing more nuanced models of cultural exchange. Interactive exhibits in Digital Reconstructions Museum in Khartoum and UNESCO sites at Jebel Barkal now feature multimedia installations, touchscreens overlaying classical itineraries onto 3D scans of sphinxes, audio recordings of Nubian elders recounting hidden totems, and augmented reality layers, revealing micro-cartouches in real time. These exhibits invite global audiences to witness the dialogue between foreign eyes and indigenous voices. 3. Dialogue of histories, lessons, and legacies. A multiplicity of perspectives recognizing bias and partiality. Classical narratives offered invaluable snapshots, yet were shaped by cultural preconceptions, gastronomic analogies, imperial agendas, interpretive errors. Acknowledging these biases allows us to integrate traveler insights without erasing local meanings, crafting a more holistic historical tapestry. Valuing local knowledge. Nubian oral traditions, guild records, and material analyses provide corrective counterweights, reminding us that the Sphinx's stone scripts were authored by many hands, not just those of foreign observers. Embracing this plurality honors voices long marginalized in the academic canon and bead, enduring questions as you consider Herodotus's pomegranate-hued barley comparisons, Strabo's flood-tide coordinates, Pliny's monolithic marvel lists, and the revival of Nubian stewardship over these stone sentinels. Reflect on this. How can we, in our own era of global exchange and cultural reinterpretation, navigate the tensions between external fascination and internal stewardship, ensuring that the monuments we admire remain living texts shaped by all who encounter them, rather than static relics defined by a single narrative? Divine guardians and living shrines. The Sphinx in Nubian religious life long before European travelers arrived. The Nubian Sphinxes of Jebel Barkal stood at the intersection of stone and spirit, not merely as imperial monuments but as living participants in sacred rites. In this section, you will enter the temple precinct at dawn, when priests and worshippers gathered beneath the cold granite gazes of Sphinx, guardians to enact rituals that wove these statues into the very fabric of community belief. You'll see how daily libations enlivened their protective power, how annual festivals renewed their cosmic mandates, and how local families maintained private devotions at their bases, revealing a dimension of Nubian religious life far richer and more intimate than any classical account could capture. Daily offerings, awakening the stone, guardians, morning libations and incense at first light. Temple attendants lit rows of seal oil lamps before each sphinx. The soft orange glow flickered across carved manes and feline shoulders as priests carried braziers of resin. With slow, measured steps, they approached each sphinx's feet, sprinkling cool Nile water over its paws and chanting invocations to Kunam and Amun-Re awake. O watcher of the dawn, that your gaze may guard our fields and guide our hearts. The mingled sense of burning resin and damp stone filled the air, infusing the Sphinx with what worshippers called the breath of life. This daily rite, conducted in near silence, aside from the soft plink of lamp flames, underscored the belief that Sphinxes were not inert rock but animate spiritual beings whose favor was essential for the day's well-being. Offerings of grain and berafted libations. Temple stewards, often novice guild members, placed small woven baskets of barley grains and ceramic bowls of barley beer at the Sphinx's bases. These offerings served dual purposes, nourishing the stone guardians, divine aspects, and providing pilgrims a means of participation. Visitors dipped their fingers into the beer, touched it to the Sphinx's paws, then drank a small sip, sharing in a ritual meal that bound human and stone in reciprocal sustenance. Protective amulets and miniature Sphinx throughout the day. Devotees tied small fabric pouches containing carved ivory Sphinx amulets around the statues, ankles, or wedged them into crevices at shoulder joints. Grandparents, mothers, and children alike believed these miniature replicas ensured the larger Sphinx's vigilance extended outward in concentric circles, safeguarding families, herds, and fields from misfortune. To communal festivals, reaffirming cosmic order. The Nile's birthday festival each late summer. As floodwaters peaked, the temple hosted the Nile's birthday festival. Sphinxes flanking the temple's riverbank entrance received special adornments. Reed garlands woven with papyrus blooms draped across their backs, and linen banners painted with solar emblems tied to their headdresses. Priests led processions of boat crews and fishermen, carrying votive boats of polished wood past each Sphinx, chanting blessings for abundant floods and fertile fields. In this context, Sphinxes functioned as sentinels of renewal, watching over the river's rebirth. Solstice day celebrations on the winter solstice. When daylight reached its minimum, Sphinxes became focal points in nocturnal ceremonies. Oil lamps multiplied tenfold around each figure, creating an auric glow that emphasized carved contours and hidden iconographic inlays. Those stellar and world eyes now visible in lamplight. Choir boys intoned hymns to the setting sun, and congregations offered silent prayers for the return of light. These festivals reaffirmed the Sphinx's cosmic role as a mediator between celestial cycles and earthly rhythms. Private clan rituals beyond state-sponsored festivals. Individual clans identified by their totemic animal emblems on Sphinx shoulders held private rituals in early evening. At prearranged times, elder clan members gathered at their clan's Sphinx, reciting genealogical chants that traced lineage back to foundational carvers. They poured palm wine into carved niches and draped their clan banners over the Sphinxes, forepaws invoking ancestral protection in personal spheres, childbirth, and cattle herding. 3. Sacred law and Sphinx adjudications. Oracular functions. Rarely, when disputes arose over land or water rights, disputing parties brought offerings before a Sphinx at dawn. A priest would plunge a ceremonial staff into the statue's base groove. If the staff remained firm, the land claim was upheld. If it wobbled, the plaintiff was considered in error. Though modern observers question the method's fairness, for Nubians this was a legitimate Sphinx adjudication, reflecting belief in the statue's divine impartiality. Oaths sworn before stone contracts. Marriage agreements, apprenticeship pacts, short-term labor covenants were sometimes solemnized by touching a Sphinx's paw and swearing an oath. Breaking such oaths carried not only social stigma but deeply felt spiritual consequences. Violators believed they risked the Sphinx's curse, illness, barrenness, or drought. Legal astroka occasionally record these Sphinx-sworn oaths, linking secular commitments to sacred enforcement. IV. Material and spiritual maintenance. Periodic redoka reapplication over time. Soot and sand dulled carved surfaces and buried subtle iconographic signals. Each new moon, select guild members undertook maintenance, cleansing with Nile water, lightly repolishing redica paste into shoulder grooves, and reapplying gilded pigments to solar discs. Though ostensibly artistic work, these acts were considered ritual revitalizations, renewing the Sphinx's spiritual potency. Repair of damaged features when parts of the Sphinx nose headdress elements, poor edges eroded or broke. Master carvers recarved missing details under the guidance of temple priests. These repairs followed ritual prescriptions, libations first, then chiseling under a sandaled foot placed atop the chip to absorb negative energy, concluding with a consecratory whisper to remind the guardian of its purpose. Unresolved question as you leave the hushed sanctuary, having witnessed morning libations, communal feasts of grain and beer, elaborate flood and solstice festivals, scribed oaths before stone, and the tender care of carvers renewing each sphinx's divine vitality. Consider this. What happens when our own monuments and public artworks cease to inspire ritual care and personal involvement? And how might we rekindle communal practices that bridge civic pride with shared responsibility for cultural guardianship? From bustling studios to silent quarries, the waning of Nubian Sphinx carving after centuries of near-continuous sculpting activity along the Nile shores, the great workshops and quarries at Jebel Barkal entered a slow descent. Political upheavals, shifting economic priorities, and environmental stresses converged to silence chisels that once rang from dawn to dusk. In this first section, you'll trace the factors that led master carvers to lay down their tools. With the withdrawal of royal patronage during the late period, the gradual silting of Nile channels that choked transport routes, and the depopulation of support villages as drought and conflict drove families away, you'll stand amid overgrown soapits and empty forges, marveling at the silent grandeur of half-hewn blocks and moss-stroked terraces, testaments to a craft that once defined a civilization's identity. Political shifts in patronage with intermediate period fragmentation, with Egypt's central authority fragmented after the New Kingdom. Pharaohs in Thebes and Memphis vied for control. Nubian Sphinx commissions dwindled as regional rulers prioritized military defenses and local cults over monumental art. Temple treasuries redirected grain and metal allotments to garrisons, leaving carving guilds with austerity rations and unmet block quotas. Kushite retreat and changing capitals. The rise of the Kushite dynasty centered power at Napata and later Meroë. Shifting elite focus southward, Jebel Barkal workshops, once at the empire's spiritual heart, found themselves peripheral. Royal sponsorship for Sphinx carving evaporated, and master sculptors received fewer formal commissions, prompting many to migrate alongside the court or adapt skills to smaller-scale urban art in new capitals. Environmental stress and economic decline now channel silting sediment deposition, accelerated by upstream deforestation, clogged secondary channels that fed quarry docks. During successive low flood years, rafts grounded on receding shallows, complicating block transport. With haulage costs rising, temple authorities deemed Grand Sphinx programs economically unviable. Village depopulation support hamlets, grain outposts, carpentry villages, forge camps dwindled as drought and internecine conflict disrupted farming. Families relocated toward more secure oases. Labor pools evaporated. Sawpits and tool workshops fell into disrepair, their adobe walls crumbling and floors blanketed by sand. 3. Abandonment and archaeological silent quarries and overgrown ramps. Centuries of neglect left quarry faces pockmarked by blocks, ramps scarred but unused, and sledge tracks half erased by shifting sands. By the Roman period, only sporadic restoration efforts took place, aimed at temple repairs rather than new sphinxes. The grand industrial complex of workshops laid dormant in open air, museum of interrupted ambition. Medieval obscurity. Abrega of geographers of the 10th century CE, such as Al-Makrizi, mention ruined lion statues guarded by local herders, but lack detailed descriptions. Oral legends among Nubian communities preserved temple names and flood festivals, yet the technical memory of carving methods faded into myth. Unresolved questioners, you wander through empty forges and silent soppits where once mastery and devotion converged. Reflect on this. What does the abandonment of such a vibrant, artistic industrial complex teach us about the fragility of cultural practices, and how might recognizing early signs of decline inform our efforts to preserve living traditions? Today, you walked among overgrown soapits, silent quarries, and crumbling workshops once alive with chisels, sledges, and boatyards. Now, in Section 2, we explore the human and environmental landscapes that emerged after the great carving tradition, waned, how local communities remembered, repurposed, or neglected these spaces, and how sporadic rediscoveries by travelers and priests foreshadowed modern archaeological revival. You'll witness villagers turning sphinx blocks into livestock shelters, early monks carving crosses into temple niches, and Ottoman-era pilgrims stumbling upon hidden inscriptions, each encounter layering new stories atop the silence of abandon. STONEI village adaptations, from workshops to pastoral uses, temporary shelters and animal pens, shepherds' enclosures emptied, pastoralists grazing goats and sheep used soppit trenches and alcoves and collapsed walls as makeshift pens. Low stone walls, once intended for storage, transformed into enclosures where animals sheltered from desert winds. Shepherds carved rudimentary notches into ledge stones, early graffiti marking personal ownership of stones, echoing guild signatures now repurposed for livestock. Housing within quarry ramps, families seeking refuge during harsh dry seasons sometimes. Excavated cavities beneath eroded ramps, these shallow caves, reinforced with wooden beams scavenged from old sledges, offered cool retreats from the midday sun. Hearth ash layers indicate these spaces supported multi-generational occupation. Their soot-blackened ceilings mirroring the temple forge's former GLOWB agricultural reclamation irrigated garden plots. Seasonal floodwaters still pooled in depressions. Near ramp bases, local farmers dug shallow channels from these pools to cultivate small gardens of onions, lettuce, and millet. They used flat sledge runners as improvised plow blades, turning stone implements into agricultural tools. A pragmatic repurposing that underscores the region's adaptability. Material salvage for built-made brick kilns and wooden sheds rose atop old workshop sites, their walls incorporating chipped granite fragments. Locally called stone of the ancestors, these reused blocks lent structural stability and symbolize continuity. Each reused stone a silent witness to bygone craft, now woven into the fabric of daily life. Asterisk 2. Ecclesiastical interventions, and medieval Makingza monastic retreats and Christian pilgrims. Early monastic settlements by the 6th century CE, ascetic monks established hermitages in temple ruins. They carved simple crosses into sheltered sphinx bases, pried loosely to build small chapels, and inscribed Coptic prayers along quarries' edges, though few of these carvings survive. Occasional scratched crosses attest to spiritual appropriation of pagan spaces. Pilgrim accounts and local lore. Medieval Christian travelers, such as John of Ephesus, mention lion sentinels of stone where desert fathers retreated. Local guides narrated legends that Sphinx wept when priests lit evening lamps. Stories blending Christian icons with lingering reverence for ancient guardians. B. Ottoman and early European sightings. 16th-18th century traveler Guestone officials, passing through Nubia, documented ruined temples with lion statues half buried in sand. The reports recorded in Arabic gazetteers include occasional sketches showing collapsed sphinx heads and tilted bodies, indicating early awareness, though lacking systematic preservation. European explorers' sketches in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. European surveyors like James Bruce and Frederick Caliot made basic drawings of Jebel Barkal's sphinxes, often focusing on the largest or most accessible statues. They overlooked hidden iconographic details and clan markings. Yet their journals preserved crucial orientation, date angles, dimensions, and relative positions that modern archaeologists have used to relocate lost statues. 3. Early archaeological awakening. Preliminary mapping and conservation efforts. 19th century mission reports, French and British missions, following Bruce and Caliot, produced rudimentary maps of temple precincts. Engineers measured sphinx spaces with chains and compasses, noting stone dimensions but rarely recording relief motifs. Their conservation priorities favored clearing sand from main processional avenues rather than detailed study. Local custodian initiatives recognizing the risk of further erosion. Some local sheiks organized small cleanup parties, clearing vegetation and stabilizing rampstones with mud mortar. Though lacking formal authorization, these efforts demonstrate indigenous concern for heritage predating official interventions. B. Institutional interest and the foundations of Nubian archaeology. Establishment of Sudan Antiquities Service in the 1930s under British administration. The Sudan Antiquities Service SAS catalogued Jebel Barkal's monuments, employing both European archaeologists and Nubian laborers. SAS initiated the first systematic surveys, documenting Sphinx conditions and beginning limited restorations, repairing collapsed bases, and re-erecting leaning statues. Integration of local expertise. Essays recognized the value of oral traditions in locating hidden inscriptions and clan-specific emblems. They interviewed elders who recalled processional routes and seasonal festivals, integrating these recollections into site interpretation. An early nod toward participatory archaeology. Unresolved reflection as you traverse abandoned forges turned livestock pens, cross outcroppings marked by shepherd's graffiti, and early sketchbooks that attempted to capture crumbling sphinxes. Reflect on this. What responsibilities do we bear in preserving cultural landscapes that communities have long adapted and reimagined, and how might collaboration between professional archaeologists and local custodians honor both scientific rigor and living memory? Rediscovery, restoration, and lessons for heritage stewardship. In the centuries following the decline of Nubian Sphinx carving, when quarries lay silent and soppets fell to sand, the monuments themselves endured as mute witnesses to a once vibrant artistry. Section 3 follows the narrative of rediscovery and restoration. How modern archaeologists, local communities, and international bodies have collaborated to rescue these statues from oblivion. How debates over conservation methods and cultural ownership have shaped their futures, and what the fate of the Jebel Barkal sphinxes can teach us about preserving living traditions in a changing world. Modern archaeological expeditions and evolving mid-20th century ground service. In the 1950s, the newly formed Sudan Antiquities Service (SAS) intensified work at Jebel Barkal under Director Francis Lloyd. Teams of surveyors, hydrologists and epigraphers undertook the first systematic mapping of the precinct, topographical mapping using theodolites and plane tables. Survey teams established a grid across the temple terraces, recording each sphinx's GPS coordinates later converted from local datum, dimensions and orientation. These baseline data enabled precision relocation of statues and informed flood protection planning. Epigraphic record interpreters traced visible inscriptions, cartouches, guild bands, clan emblems on mylar sheets. Even weathered glyphs were sieved through sunlight, raking and rubbings to capture faint marks. This archival corpus provided scholars with a reference for chronological sequencing, linking each sphinx to its likely patron and workshop. Community liaison crucially employed local Nubian workers and hereditary custodians whose families had long maintained oral histories of sphinx festivals and clan rituals. Their testimonies guided archaeologists to lesser-known statues hidden in gullies, emphasizing the value of indigenous knowledge in rediscovery efforts. B. Conservation techniques and ethical debates. As excavations revealed buried sphinxes, the challenge shifted to conservation, stabilizing stone and limiting further deterioration. Protective shelters. Early efforts erected corrugated iron shelters over the most exposed sphinx rows. While effective at blocking sandstorms and direct sun, these shelters provoked debate. Some argued they imposed a modern industrial aesthetic on an ancient setting, detracting from the site's authenticity. Lime wash and minimal intervention experimented with lime-based sealants similar to ancient palm nut lacquer stew film. This approach, championed by Nubian-French collaboration teams in the 1980s, sought to mimic historical techniques. Opponents cautioned that infilling might trap moisture and accelerate internal decay, underscoring the complex balance between intervention and preservation. Anastylosis versus fragmentary display. Where fallen sphinx fragments were substantial heads detached from bodies, teams debated whether to reconstruct them anastylosis or leave them in situ as evocative ruins. Ultimately, a compromise emerged. A few key figures were gently reassembled with stainless steel dowels, while others remained as fragmentary testimonies, preserving both legibility and the poetry of decay. 2. Community engagement and intangible heritage. Reviving rituals and local stewardship, recognizing that stonework survived best when embedded in living culture. Heritage authorities partnered with Nubian communities to revive traditional practices. Annual festival revivals. In 2005, a collaboration between the National Corporation for Antiquities and Museums (NCAM) and local elders reinstated the late summer Nile's birthday festival at Jebel Barkal. Participants once again wove papyrus garlands for sphinxes, chanted clan-specific hymns, and staged boat processions. These rituals reconnected residents to the monuments, fostering grassroots pride and a sense of ownership critical to long-term protection. Guardianship programs. Youth from nearby villages enrolled in guardian schools, learning basic site stewardship, clearing invasive plants, monitoring vandalism, and guiding visitors, stipended by heritage grants. These guardians gained vocational skills and became ambassadors for Nubian heritage, bridging professional conservation and community care. B. Intangible heritage documentation. Beyond stone, efforts turned to recording the living traditions once tied to sphinx veneration. Oral history archives, ethnographs compiled transcripts of clan elders recounting apprenticeship oaths, hidden symbol interpretations, and feast etiquette. These narratives, now housed in Khartoum's National Museum, preserve the intangible codes that classical texts overlooked, and serve as training materials for heritage educators. Digital storytelling platforms. A 2018 UNESCO-funded initiative created an interactive website featuring 360 scans of sphinxes, overlaid with audio recordings of Nubian elders explaining iconographic details. This digital bridge allows global audiences to see with local eyes, democratizing access while reinforcing community-centered narratives. 3. International recognition and sustainable tourism. A UNESCO World Heritage status in 2003. Barkal and the nearby Nubian monuments were inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage list under criteria highlighting interchange of human values and testimony to cultural traditions. This designation unlocked funding for conservation. International grants financed comprehensive structural studies, moisture mapping, freestyle modeling, and staff training in advanced stone conservation. Tourism infrastructure development and constructed visitor centers, interpretive trails, and bilingual signage. Efforts emphasized low-impact design, shaded boardwalks, solar-powered lighting, and locally sourced materials, ensuring tourism benefited nearby communities. Be balancing access and preservation. Despite the influx of visitors, over 30,000 annually. By 2019, site managers strove to protect fragile sculptures. Zoning and visitor flow control of the precinct was divided into core and buffer zones. Core areas closest to Sphinx rows allowed guided tours only, with strict group sizes, and time limits. Buffer zones enabled self-guided exploration of less vulnerable monuments. Distributing visitor impact. Revenue-sharing models. A portion of ticket revenues supports community projects, school supplies, water systems, and medical clinics, ensuring that locals perceive direct benefits from tourism. This economic stake underpins local advocacy for site protection. 4. Reflections and forward paths. Integrating past lessons into future stewardship. The trajectory of Jebel Barkal sphinxes from thriving workshops to silent ruins, to rediscovery and revival, offers enduring lessons. Early warning signs. The decline began with changing patronage and environmental shifts. Today, monitoring funding flows, environmental data, water tables, desert encroachment, and community vitality can signal emerging risks to living traditions, allowing preemptive action. Holistic heritage models. Effective preservation integrates stone conservation, intangible heritage documentation, and community engagement. Jebel Barkal's example demonstrates that monuments thrive when their spiritual, social, and material dimensions are honored in concert. B. A living dialogue across time. As you depart from the quiet of restored workshops and visitor-guided processions, consider how the Sphinx, once abandoned and forgotten, now stand renewed through collaborative efforts. These stones bear the imprint of ancient carvers, silent caracals of power and belief, and the footprints of modern guardians nurturing their legacies. Thought-provoking reflection. In an age of rapid change, climate shift, cultural globalization, and evolving tourism, how might we apply the lessons of Jebel Barkal's festivals, guardians, and archaeological awakenings to safeguard not only monuments but the living traditions that give them meaning for future generations?